Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Kurama is sent back in time before the sealing him inside of Naruto. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Kurama was not a being that most would consider slow. Powerful. Yeah, sure. Arrogant. He could probably give Orochimaru a run for his money. But despite his fondness for chakra bombs that could level mountains or just, sitting on people, he really knew his way around a battlefield and could be surprisingly tricky. If something caught his attention, his focus was instant, laser-like, and, okay, maybe he was a little hard to wake up. This time, though, waking up was a little stranger than usual. He didn't seem to be in a soar, for one. Also, he didn't seem to be laying down. Did Naruto switch with me? I hope he knows I actually don't know that many ninjutsu. And what's the deal with not telling me before doing something this stupid? Okay, that was likely the exact reason he didn't tell me. Just exactly as going through your head, you stupid brat. His head crashed into the ground. It wasn't particularly gentle. Naruto. What the hell are you doing in there? I was asleep. What's going on? Bindings tightened around him. Hard enough where he could actually feel that they were chains through his fur. Kurama growled. This was getting nowhere fast. Worse, he didn't even need to open his eyes to know that there was more than one being right in front of him that hated him with immense passion. Or Naruto. It was hard to tell. Lots of people tended to not distinguish them, which was annoying as hell. As long as it isn't those damn Uchiha. I hate those stupid control freaks and I don't want to hear a word of it, Naruto. Still, he got no response from his Kurama would have once called him a warden, but after he removed the seal and, trusted him a little more than was probably wise, the only thing keeping him actually bound was that he really didn't want to kill the kid. Especially after Naruto stopped taking his chakra without asking. So maybe friend really was the correct term, as much as he wanted to gag when thinking about it. These two sources of hatred in front of him, they certainly didn't move like they were at full battle strength, so it was unlikely that Naruto just decided to mess with him and make him fight instead. But something was definitely up with Naruto right now. He usually responded right away. Based on the chains, which were uncomfortably familiar, his enemy probably had talent with sealing. He growled again. If those bastards sealed Naruto, well, they certainly weren't going to get the same treatment as his friend. He didn't open his eyes. He didn't even try to stand up to break the chains that were binding him, even though they didn't even feel like they were close to the magnitude really needed to seal him. No, why would he give away an advantage like that? Especially when they decided to line up so perfectly like that. Minato was confused. The sensation was not totally unfamiliar to him, as his wife caused this state frequently. But battle was always a different matter. He always knew what to do. But not now. The Kyuubi had simply stopped. He had broken that man's control over the beast a minute prior, and all that it had done was close its eyes. This wasn't anything close to normal behavior. It barely reacted to Kushina's chains, either, which was completely baffling. Yet that was no reason not to take advantage of the strange situation. The unfortunate truth to the matter, the truth that Minato did not want to admit, was that Kushina would likely die soon. It was really rather simple. She was a Jinchuriki, and her Biju had been extracted. While it should have been possible to reseal the creature, especially bound as it was, Kushina was already deathly low on chakra and would be immediately overwhelmed. Not to mention that his own chakra was low enough after teleporting several Biju bombs. In order to seal the Kyuubi away completely well, he would need her help, making the situation only worse. The beasts were beings of chakra, though. Perhaps if he were only to seal the beast in parts, the attack came quickly. Too quickly, compared to all the other attacks he had defended against previously. On reflection, he was actually unsure whether his body's refusal to move was the result of genuine surprise or his subconscious, realizing that Naruto was directly behind him and would have easily been caught by the attack. But that was irrelevant at the moment. He no longer had the time for 3 seals. He barely had time for one. Kushina. She tensed behind him. Of course. The beasts seemed to freeze. The pressure of the Kyuubi's immense claw through their bodies ceased, and even Kushina's chains seemed to settle oddly on the creature's fur. Its eyes were open for the first time, and Minato almost faltered. Kushina's chains shattered as his seal activated, the beast contorting as it flew into Minato's infant son. Its departure was their death knell, its claws still real enough to tear through the rest of their bodies. But all he could think about was how strange it looked for an expression like that to be on a face that evil. What could cause such a creature to feel such horror? Kurama found himself once more in a cage, though that was almost irrelevant. He was used to that. He knew where he was now. He knew when he was now, as impossible as that seemed. And so, due to his own stupidity, he had cost Naruto his parents once again. He had almost cost Naruto his life, simply because he assumed that malice meant an enemy. He tried to excuse the error by pointing out to himself that it was a perfectly reasonable assumption to make, given the recent shinobi alliance and a great many people accepting Naruto, and even himself, as if not a friend, then an ally. Anybody else was trying to literally end the world. That thought rang hollow when he realized that a simple half-second of thought and observation would have meant Naruto could have grown up loved. Grown up as a hero, like the one he had become. Or at the very least, not treated like Kurama was. But the room was dark, the water was cold, and he would have a long time to think on exactly what went wrong. And how he was going to fix it. Naruto smiled a lot. He smiled in the morning as he looked around his dingy apartment and made cup ramen. He smiled as he ran through the streets of Konoha, getting his justice in little ways. And he smiled when he got caught. When someone paid attention to him. Sometimes, when they smiled back, it even reached his eyes. Kurama had heard many times from Naruto what his childhood was like. He had even taken advantage of his anger and grief many times in an attempt to wrest as much control as he could. But back then, he had barely paid attention unless Naruto's emotions were unstable enough for him to take the opportunity. His anger burned brightly, almost as much as the first time he was here. But the anger was not for his sake this time. He wanted to destroy the village even more now. Not the village itself, but about 19 out of 20 of the residents he wanted to kill slowly and painfully. But Naruto had taught him something before all this. Older, wiser Naruto hadn't tried to get rid of his anger. Not completely, that is. Naruto was angry all the time. But he couldn't just kill everyone that he was mad at, even though he had the power to. Kurama would have probably ignored him if he had just done his usual it's wrong routine. No, he had given a better reason. The most satisfying revenge was to prove them wrong. Directing the anger to make their entire world, their entire life, turn on its head. Don't destroy the body. Destroy what makes them an enemy. Destroy the hate. Naruto had done that to him. Done it for him. It had taken a long time, but both of them gained a friend. Oh, and he totally had permission to gloat about it afterwards. Naruto didn't do that step as often as he should, but Kurama thought it was important and he had agreed, albeit reluctantly. Even if it was directed at him. He thought it was only fair. So this time, when he had finally had enough of watching Naruto's rejection and mistreatment, instead of trying to exploiting his anger to try and destroy as much as possible, he talked. Naruto. The boy himself didn't seem to hear him. This was to be expected, of course. He didn't know of his unwilling passenger and had not received any sort of meditation training. This would take time. He had time. Naruto. Naruto smiled and he didn't know why. There was just something strangely good about everything. Of course it was a good prank. All of his pranks were good pranks, even when he got caught. But it didn't feel like the prank. It was like the sun shone just a little better, the air was just a little fresher, and his chest was just a little warmer. It felt almost like someone wanted him there. He wasn't even close to Ichiraku Ramen, either. Perhaps this happiness came from the news he had gotten in the mail earlier today. He had been accepted into the academy. He was going to become a ninja. And someday, he would be strong enough to become acknowledged. And someday, he would become Hokage. He would be respected, just like the old man. Of course, he still had to wait even longer. Lessons wouldn't actually start for 3 more months, which felt like absolute torture. So yeah, Naruto didn't really understand why he was so happy all of a sudden. You don't have to wait. Naruto froze with his hand on his apartment door, then quickly looked around. There was nobody in sight. Hey. Show yourself. I'm not a ninja, brat. I'm inside you. Naruto scrunched up his face. You aren't making any sense. Only ninja hide themselves. I'm in your head, idiot. Oh. I don't get it. Am I going crazy? Should I go to the hospital? If you were actually crazy, why would you ask the voice in your head for help? It doesn't matter anyway. You aren't crazy unless you count the normal Naruto brand of crazy. I'm sealed inside you. Naruto scratched the back of his head. I don't understand, but what do you want with me, anyway? Did I want you to become Hokage? What? But you'll need a lot more than just the stuff you learn at the academy. There are no shortcuts, and it will be hard work. You need to be more than a ninja. You need to be an exceptional one. So I'm going to make you one. Who are you? Why are you doing this for me? The voice was silent for a while, and Naruto started to open his front door again, but the response stopped him again. An apology. A promise. Perhaps a return favor. Pick whatever you feel like. Naruto closed the door behind him, still clearly confused. My name is Kurama. Kurama. The boy sounded out the word carefully. Thank you, I guess. Don't thank me just yet. You have a long day tomorrow. Kurama hadn't spoken to him for the rest of the evening, and Naruto soon forgot of his weird new head sensei. By the time he had actually woken up the next day, Naruto had shrugged the whole thing off, far more invested in planning his next series of pranks. And waking up. He was almost as bad as Kurama when it came to mornings. And he still had to eat breakfast. You're not eating cup ramen for breakfast. Naruto jumped, slamming his head against the open cabinet. Ow. Oh. He ducked down, rubbing at the sore spot. Apparently the conversation yesterday wasn't just a weird dream. Naruto registered what he had actually said. Hey. Ramen is the best. Kurama grunted. Debatable. That Ichiraku ramen place might be okay, Naruto, but that cup ramen crap is not. You need food with nutrients. Food with energy. Naruto looked distinctly offended. Ramen has plenty of energy. He looked back down at the cup in his hand. Well, maybe this stuff doesn't quite taste as good, but still. He shuffled his feet. I can't afford to go out to eat every day. The implied statement was not lost on Kurama. No other merchant let Naruto anywhere near their shops. Even the few that tolerated him clearly overcharged for their products. But to Kurama, there was a very simple solution. Then it's time you learn to get your own breakfast. Grab a kunai. Kurama-sensei. I don't think my practice kunai are going to be very useful. He had bought all sorts of equipment as soon as he had heard of his acceptance into the academy, but battle-ready tools were not something most shopkeepers would sell to most any academy student, not without permission from their instructor. And that wasn't even accounting for everyone's utter disdain for Naruto in particular. Easily fixed. Go to the training grounds. Naruto rolled his eyes, but grabbed his keys and made his way outside. He had barely locked the door and started out in the direction of the academy before Kurama stopped him. Not those grounds, idiot. You're only going to find sharp kunai on the actual graduated shinobi training grounds. How was I supposed to know that's what I was looking for? I thought I was just gonna ask for a sharp one or something. Brat. You're going to look for a discarded one. Naruto growled. Fine. Are you gonna tell me why we're looking for one that's no good anymore, or are you just gonna make me guess? I don't even know why I'm listening to you in the first place. You say you're going to help me be Hokage, but I'm already gonna do that. You say I can't eat ramen anymore, call me an idiot just like everybody else, and then just tell me stuff without explaining anything. The voice was silent, and so Naruto ran on seemingly alone. He briefly wondered how mad the weird voice actually was. Even though this Kurama was even less polite than he was, there was something in the voice that he had only heard in Old Man Hokage. Naruto knew that he was obviously in the right, but an odd sense of guilt settled around him for a reason he couldn't comprehend. So when the voice actually returned, he jumped slightly. Perhaps you should not listen to me. He almost skidded to a stop in the middle of the street, but had just enough of a mind to duck into an alleyway instead. What? Why? I'm not a ninja. Okay, but you said you were gonna make me one. I'm not human. Well duh. That would be really weird. I don't think another human could fit in my head unless they were really, really tiny. Shut up. I wasn't finished. Naruto closed his mouth. I am the Kyuubi no Kitsune. The what? The growl in his head was almost deafening and actually kinda hurt. Naruto. I attacked Konoha. I killed hundreds. I killed your parents. Naruto's stomach lurched. He grabbed a fistful of his shirt, pressing his fist hard against his chest. What? Why? No. He stumbled into the wall, sliding down to sit roughly on the ground. Naruto, lift up your shirt. He didn't, but already knew what was there. It was that weird tattoo. He didn't know where it came from and never really questioned why it was there, but somehow it seemed more important now. That is me. The previous Hokage gave up his life to seal me into you, to save the village. Naruto did not know about this yet. It would be taught at the academy, and even then, Naruto would only have paid attention to what sounded interesting. Naruto looked up from the ground, staring vaguely up at the sky. You don't seem very happy about it. That was not what Kurama was expecting. It is a natural consequence of my actions. I no longer resent my prison, though it does get boring. Naruto blinked in confusion for a few seconds. Oh. No, that's not what I meant at all. I meant attacking the village and stuff. You sounded sad, I suppose. More angry that I made the same mistake twice. He braced his hands against the alley wall, pushing himself to his feet. And you still want to make me an awesome ninja, right? Yes. Then you don't have to say anything else, you know. And with that, he started to run. Naruto stared at the dead rabbit, kunai in hand. The knife itself was chipped in places and probably not battle ready, but it was still sharp. Sharp enough to kill a rabbit. But at this point, he was kinda unsure what to do with it. Eat it, idiot. Naruto looked at the rabbit dubiously. But there's, like, blood everywhere. I don't think I'm supposed to eat blood and stuff. The fox in his stomach scoffed. Never was a problem for me. But if you're that squeamish, just cut a bigger hole and let the blood drain out. Pretty simple. Naruto hesitated. Damn it, Kit. Do you want to be a ninja or not? It's just blood. Shinobi deal with blood all the time. He dragged the kunai across, letting a lot more blood spill out. Good job. Now just wait a few minutes and you can eat some breakfast. Naruto glanced at his stomach. Shouldn't I cook it or something? Don't bother. Cooking only affects taste and I've always preferred raw. Besides, if you're looking to become a ninja, fires only make it easy for the enemy to find you. It's a dead giveaway. He glanced back at the rabbit. Okay then. Rabbit wasn't all that bad, Naruto decided. It wasn't as good as ramen, naturally, but it wasn't bad. A little bland, but a lot more filling than instant ramen. And his new sensei assured him that he would actually get hungry less often. Which if it was true, would be awesome. Also, it was free. Meaning it was even less expensive than the instant ramen he got from the grocery. The only real bad thing is that it was hard to catch a rabbit. It had taken him almost 2 hours to finally catch one. But apparently that was just part of training. If he couldn't catch a rabbit, he wasn't nearly good enough to be a ninja. That's what sensei had said, at least. But Naruto knew better. He really meant that when he got better at being a ninja, getting food would be a lot easier. So he had a much more upfront motivation for training. Speaking of training sensei, when are you gonna teach me cool jutsu? I don't have hands to do any hand seals. So I never really paid attention to ninjutsu. And jinjutsu is particularly distasteful to me. What? I'm not gonna learn anything cool. Training your body is equally important. Same with learning to use weapons properly. Besides, your academy teacher will show you ninjutsu. Naruto's shoulders sagged. I'm not complaining, I understand that this stuff is important, but you really can't teach me anything else. Why bother to pay attention if you can't even use it? He rubbed the back of his head. I guess so. It just sucks. Though I did pay attention to a style I never expected to be able to take advantage of. Naruto's head snapped up. Yuin jutsu, sealing jutsu? What's that? It's what traps me inside you. Naruto made a face. I don't think I want to know how to do that. It is very useful to defeat an opponent who is stronger than you. Then I'll just train to be stronger. Naruto heard a deep sigh from inside him. You will not always get the chance. Regardless, that is not the only thing that Fuinjutsu are used for. Some lower level techniques include sealing equipment and supplies in a scroll for ease of travel and producing explosive tags. Naruto's focus sharpened. The explosives interested him regardless, but his sensei's insistence on him carrying supplies for every scenario was a large contributing factor for his constant soreness during training. And as you get better, it is possible to entrap and immobilize targets for easy retrieval or disposal. Naruto translated that into new prank opportunities and easy hunting. The true master can do almost whatever his imagination produces. Alright, you've sold me. It is not an easy art. It requires study and precision. Naruto hesitated for all of 3 seconds. No, if it's gonna let me do awesome stuff, then I don't care. Alright. Go buy some paper, ink, and a brush. When you can say that each of your letters are exactly the same as the last, wake me up. What? Just do it, moron. Do you want to learn seals or not? Naruto tucked his chipped kunai back into his belt and rubbed his sore muscles. Well, at least I get a break from the training. I just wish he wasn't an ass about it. I can hear that, you know. Naruto jolted upright. What? I'm sealed inside you. I can hear your thoughts, especially when you practically shout them like that. Oh. You don't have to talk to me out loud, right? Naruto walked all the way back to his apartment before he realized that he still needed to buy the supplies. There. I finished. Naruto put the brush down onto his kitchen table, the only table actually suitable enough for writing. Not good enough. Naruto gaped. What? That's my best writing yet. But writing is only half of what I wanted. It needs to be consistent. If you can write the same thing 20 times in a row, with only minimal differences, then I will let you advance to the next task. Naruto groaned. That's so unfair. I am not being any more difficult than necessary. You will not succeed at my next task if you cannot complete this one. Mistakes in sealing often means losing fingers, or worse. I don't want to have to heal your injuries every 2 minutes. Okay. It still sucks. If it makes you feel any better, I believe you are close. He sighed. I know. It's just I understand why, but I really wanted something to show before I started the academy stuff. Kurama could already tell where this was going. You already have something to show off. Why do you think half your day has been physical exercise? Why do you think I've been lecturing you on your hunting skills? Your taijutsu is not unremarkable, and while your stealth could still use some work, you are improving at a steady rate. I just want something really cool. And there's only, like, a month left. A month usually felt like an eternity to someone as young as Naruto. And as active as he was, it usually felt even longer. But he was starting to understand just how much time training took, especially when it took this much study. Naruto could almost feel Kurama-sensei's smile. I have no doubt you will. Look at your paper. His hand had been idly writing, almost completely out of habit. Naruto wasn't as observant as his teacher was, but the past 15 lines looked almost identical. Now you have one final task. Go steal something someone else has written on. You need a handwriting sample for this. Naruto just gave a simple nod and rushed out of his apartment. He was a lot faster than he was a few months ago. Not only was he quite a bit stronger from his training, but Kurama had taught him a few useful techniques. One was how to find his own chakra. That was pretty easy for Naruto. Less easy was directing it to different parts of his body. It was all worth it when he realized that he could expel a little with each footstep to push himself forward. Like tiny explosions or something. And his first attempts really were like small explosions. It took a while for him to not immediately stumble and faceplant, and even longer for the little boosts to be consistent enough to not send him into a wall. But being able to jump really high and even run along the roofs like the other ninja was wonderful. That more than anything made him feel like his dream was closer than ever before. And of course, it made it just that much easier to escape after a prank. As long as he didn't prank other ninja, of course. Not that he would refrain from doing so if they were being particularly stupid. So it meant that as he grabbed a stack of papers from a market stall, owned by an idiot, of course, it was pretty easy to lose any pursuers and make it back to his apartment within a minute. Alright, Kit. Good job. Now sit down and copy his style. Naruto frowned. Why would I do that? He gasped. Is this so we can pretend to be that guy and get him in trouble? Sounds awesome. Not sure what that has to do with sealing, though. He heard a chuckle from his stomach. Not exactly. I have no doubt that you'll find great use in this skill. But for sealing. This is just a further test of your ability to copy things precisely. There are more than letters used in sealing, you know. Naruto nodded. Right. I think I get it. After this, I believe you will be ready to make your own explosive tags. You mean those things they wouldn't let me buy yet? Exactly. Naruto studied the paper more intensely than he had anything in his life. Boom, the training dummy exploded into splinters, which Naruto dodged. He looked back at the three others in a similar state. It wasn't a terrible loss. The training field was equipped with hundreds of them for this exact purpose. I think we can safely say that you've mastered the exploding seal. At least the basic one. There are more kinds. Yes, but you need to know more theory. I thought you were more interested in the storage scroll. Naruto scratched the back of his head. Ah, yeah. Well, he had bought a pouch for his weapons and materials, he hadn't bought a proper pack for that exact reason, and carrying around everything Kurama insisted he carry was tiresome. All he had was a rough civilian handbag and he hadn't even bothered to decorate it. Over the last 3 months, Kurama had even convinced him that his ninja apparel could use some color correction. Naruto still couldn't deal with only wearing dark blue and green, but he had been convinced to tone down his bright orange to a dull red that reminded Kurama of his own fur. Kurama noted with enthusiastic amusement that this had caused many of the adults no small amount of alarm. Naruto had to admit that this had drastically improved his stealth and made it a lot easier to hunt in general. Before learning the storage seal, Naruto, I would suggest that you make a few extra explosive seals. I believe 50 will fit into your tool pouch with relative ease. This wasn't nearly as dangerous as most civilians assumed. As with all sealing techniques, they had to be armed with chakra before use. And then activated. Explosive seals required quite a lot of chakra to arm if they were to be any use in combat. Even after activation, this particular version of the seal had a 3-second fuse. Naruto had no trouble with the chakra part of things, unlike other ninja who might need to use the explosives, but actually making new ones in combat was not an option. He wasn't exactly a fast rider. Not when he had to be that precise. Naruto sighed. Alright, sensei. That's going to take ages, though. I'm sure you can finish before class begins tomorrow. Can't you? Naruto rolled his eyes. Alright, sensei. Don't you use that tone with me. If you want to use any of the advanced techniques, you need to get faster. I just wish I could have more time before I start. Don't you want to learn ninjutsu? He grumbled. I do. He shook the bag by his side. I just feel like I should be more prepared. And not drag this clunky thing everywhere. I like that you are thinking of this as a mission. But many more aspiring ninja are less prepared than you. You can bring a bag to class. And if I'm practicing ninjutsu all the time, will I even get this scroll thing done in time? Then you will have to work harder. It will not take you 4 years to learn it, even with distractions. Fine. Where is that determination from before? Are you going to be a ninja or not? Naruto shook his head. Of course I am. I'm going to become Hokage, you know. He retracted his fist from the air. But with all the stuff you keep saying, I do not tell you the truth to discourage you. I only prepare you for the difficulty. Naruto sighed, his smile relaxing. Thanks. I don't know what I'd do without you. Kurama fell silent, now significantly more uncomfortable. Without me, you'd have a loving family, training from the best ninja in Konoha, and all the recognition you wanted. The first day of class was interesting, to say the least. Naruto never expected that something could be both exciting and boring. Okay, he hadn't expected for that particular feeling to extend to something other than Fuinjutsu. Iruka sensei was he was startlingly similar to Kurama sensei. He acted plenty nice when teaching, but fall asleep in class once. Well, long story short, he had two teachers yelling at him at the same time. Kurama had told him that this math stuff was important too, but without Kurama constantly rephrasing stuff in the textbook or the lecture, all it would do was make his brain feel fuzzy. The forehead leaf thing was exciting because he got to tell Iruka that he already knew how to do it, but frustratingly, he wasn't the only student who already knew how to use chakra. And apparently it was also to teach focus and concentration. Which was boring. Even worse, Kurama seemed to agree with him, even though last time Kurama made him do this, he stopped really fast and moved on to more interesting stuff almost right away. But since it was kinda hard to keep the leaf there for a long time, maybe both his sensei had a point. The shinobi rules were also kinda boring. And Kurama said that some of them didn't matter as much and could be broken, so he didn't see the point. He really wanted to tell Iruka sensei this, but then he'd have to explain why, and Kurama always told him that nobody could know about him. Attacking the village was a really serious thing, after all. But since learning the rules meant he could actually start sparring with other students, he made an effort. Besides, some of the rules were already things that Kurama was trying to teach him. Though he said them with a lot less confusing words. Classes stopped well before dark, though, which meant more training time. And infuriatingly more study, since apparently, sealing objects into things was significantly more complicated than sealing chakra into something, like the exploding tags. Even more infuriatingly, Kurama wouldn't just let him copy another person's seal, since it was always slightly different based on what you wanted to store. He had to know what each individual symbol did and how it all fit together. Even what order to write them in mattered for some stupid reason. He didn't even have that much time to learn it, since Kurama still insisted on doing physical training. And still wouldn't let him eat ramen. Well, he did let him use up the ramen he still had in his pantry, so he could have an easy lunch at the academy. But the only rest he got was actually sleeping. Okay, maybe the class itself lets me rest a little. My muscles aren't that sore. Exactly. Naruto found it extremely unfair that his sensei could literally tell if he was lying and just trying to get a break. You aren't a very good liar, kid. It's one of the things we need to work on. Having a sensei that could literally read your thoughts was even worse. Whatever you say. The academy classes were getting better, though. And worse at the same time. He actually managed to impress Iruka sensei when it came to the beginner Bukijutsu, even though he definitely wasn't the best in the class at throwing stuff. Kurama had to remind him that other students were trained by their families before attending as well. And even though Iruka criticized his forms, he was almost top of the class in Taijutsu. They still were doing that stupid leaf exercise thing, though they did start teaching about the basics of hand seals and more exciting stuff. They had more stupid classes like history that Kurama insisted were important, too. Hokage needed to know about a lot of uninteresting stuff. And apparently, he wouldn't be picked even if he was super strong if he couldn't pass any written exams. Aside from the lesson on the previous Hokage, it was almost the second week of classes before the history class actually got any interesting. He got to learn of the attack of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. He almost felt embarrassed to hear it secondhand, but it always felt awkward to ask it of his sensei. The actual attack wasn't told in that much detail, but he learned about the other tailed beasts, something Kurama definitely hadn't mentioned. I mean, if I had brothers, I'd probably at least have mentioned them in passing. We aren't on the best of terms, Naruto. Still. Kurama. Did you know anything about my parents? There was a significant pause. Did you seriously not notice? One of them was mentioned in this very lesson. Naruto groaned. Are you seriously going to be like this today? I'm only trying to make you think things through like you should. Your father was a sealing master by the name of Minato. Naruto clamped his hand over his mouth to prevent himself from shouting in the middle of class. Like the fourth Hokage. Kurama projected an intense feeling of irritation and Naruto cringed a little. I already told you that he sealed me, didn't I? No, you just told me the Hokage did. You didn't say anything about my dad. Oh. I apologize. It's hard to remember what you do and do not know. Did you know my mom too? Not much. Her name was Kushina Uzumaki, so it is likely that your father learned his sealing arts from her. She has some annoying chakra chains. From what I heard, she was a firebrand, but I don't have much experience with her in particular. Oh? Naruto took a deep breath. Thank you, Kurama. Naruto. Pay attention. His head whipped up to the front of the class. Sorry, Iruka-sensei. Now, as I was saying, it was only a matter of time for his behavior to become a little suspicious, though. Most people tended to avoid him, just like the rest of the village, and Naruto was very used to that, but it was only a matter of time that someone noticed that he spent every recess in the corner with a scroll and ink. Still, none of the students really cared quite enough to actually approach him. Kiba, the only kid who consistently beat him in Taijutsu, looked over quite a few times, but it was Iruka who was the first to actually come over and see what was going on. Naruto, I never see you take this many notes in class. Naruto, who never actually noticed him approach, jumped. Iruka-sensei. Sorry, I should have paid more attention. I guess I could take more notes. Iruka put his hand to his forehead, smiling a little. No, you don't have to, Naruto. You are doing fine when it comes to your tests, despite your little sleeping habit. You're just more of a physical learner. That's okay. He pointed to Naruto's scroll, where lines of Naruto's oddly precise handwriting filled almost half the paper already. The letters themselves were rather small. But I've never seen you write that much before. Are you an author? Naruto blushed. Well, Kurama had told him to keep his sealing skills relatively secret. He also said that telling people like your sensei or the Hokage the truth was important. No, Iruka-sensei. I'm just trying to make a storage scroll. Like, Fuunyu no Jutsu. Iruka frowned. That doesn't look much like a storage scroll. Yeah, I'm still learning what each little thing does. Then I can store things better and I'm not really confused when I get to the complicated stuff. Naruto carefully didn't mention his other sensei, Kurama. There were some things only the Hokage was supposed to know. If he asked. Basically he just wouldn't lie to him. You're still terrible at lying, kid. Iruka nodded, impressed. While sealing arts weren't necessarily restricted to a certain rank of shinobi, it was a rare specialization, at least nowadays. The few people who knew what they were doing usually weren't actually full ninja, they made their money creating the basic supplies for everyone else. It was a difficult art, regardless. Especially without a formal teacher. Naruto was a good student, if a little unconventional. But he wouldn't have expected him to take an interest in something like this. Especially something as non-awesome sounding as a storage scroll. A job, Naruto. If you need help with anything, I can probably find someone with some experience in seals for you to learn from. At the same time, most people who made the scrolls actually didn't know anything much past the functionality of what they were making. He just smiled. That's okay, Iruka-sensei. I have a pretty good source of information, you know. Iruka just shook his head and smiled back. That's Naruto for you. The academy stunk. And unfortunately, Kurama knew the reason. He couldn't do anything about it either, other than just have him train more than he already was. The problem was that whatever his written exam scores were, and no matter how good he was at Taijutsu or Bukijutsu, he still couldn't create a proper clone. Due to just how little chakra they required, Naruto couldn't manage to separate the proper amount. He would overcharge the thing, and it would either fail to form or become barely distinguishable as Naruto. Of course, Kurama knew that in these cases, it was possible to graduate the academy with special conditions. Rock Lee was one such student. Last time, it was only because Naruto's ability to take a written test was terrible that he never was able to take advantage of this. But Kurama also knew just how much the multi-shadow clone technique suited both Naruto's fighting style, cunning, and massive chakra reserves. Of course, one method to get this technique would be a very simple talk with the old man Hokage about the situation, an explanation of his chakra and why it would not be dangerous for him to use, and a request to use that technique as a substitute test for graduation. It might take a bit of convincing, but it wouldn't be too difficult. Kurama wanted to give Naruto a final exam of his own, though. Besides, asking the Hokage directly would likely put suspicion on Naruto for even knowing that the technique existed in the first place. He really wanted to see if Naruto could actually pull the mission off without detection this time. And if he failed, he would have a pretty good excuse for doing something that would otherwise be very illegal. Mizuki was still a teacher at the academy, a person students were expected to trust. So when Mizuki approached him with the alternate method, he remained silent in Naruto's stomach and let things play out as they did the first time. This time, well, the village didn't notice. Naruto passed his stealth test. And now that Kurama was there, talking with him, he had additional advice in completing the jutsu once he actually had it in his hands. Kurama didn't have much experience with ninjutsu in general, but this was Naruto's signature jutsu, even more than the Rasengan. He knew how it worked, inside and out. They even had enough time to take a look at the 8-trigram sealing style, just to show Naruto how complex seals could get. Kurama almost immediately regretted doing this, as it was very difficult to pull him away in time before Mizuki caught him off guard. And apparently, enough of Kurama's teachings had hammered themselves into Naruto's head that he actually realized that something was wrong with Mizuki when he asked for the scroll. As it was, shortly after negotiations broke down, a very beaten-up Mizuki was carried back to the village by 4 clones, while Naruto ran to report to the Hokage with the actual scroll of seals. And to apologize for stealing it, of course. Kurama just marveled at just how weak a Chunin could be. Of course, surprise and a good bit of arrogance definitely had something to do with Naruto's victory, both times. But still. He didn't even have to give Naruto any help. If Naruto didn't have the 8-trigram seal leading up his chakra to hold him, it would have been even easier. Needless to say, the Hokage had been surprised, seeing Naruto return with a forbidden scroll that he didn't even know was taken. GG. Sorry for borrowing this. Naruto swung open the glass case, reinforced with seals, and dropped it in with a loud thunk. Sarutobi Hiruzen just barely stopped himself from spitting tea over all the paperwork on his desk. What? The case itself was just barely out of his line of sight, given the large stacks of paper all over his desk, but it was still quite a shock. Naruto rubbed the back of his head nervously. I thought it was a test, you know. Mizuki said it was, like another way to graduate. Hiruzen stood up rapidly. Mizuki, you say? Don't worry, I beat him up and stuff. Some of my clones should be here in a bit unless they find some of those Anbu guys before they get here to give him to. Shadow clones. So he already managed to learn a jutsu. Did he find anything else in there in that short amount of time? How long ago did he take the scroll? But that wasn't as important. Naruto. How did you get that scroll in the first place? Did someone help you? Naruto just stared at him, confused. No. I was just quiet and stuff. You looked really busy. Hiruzen had, of course, felt his presence in the room. Naruto didn't visit as often as before, but he was one of the few that he allowed almost free reign in his office, and he was very used to his presence. He sometimes saw Naruto with his homework occasionally. Every child needed someone to be with every once in a while, even though Hiruzen himself didn't have much time to spare for the boy. But that wasn't the unusual part. When Naruto was younger, he would take advantage of his inattention all the time to pull pranks. I meant all the alarms and safeguards. How did you get it out of the case without triggering everything? Naruto gave him a sheepish grin. Oh, you might have to reapply a lot of the seals. I broke a lot of them. He raised an eyebrow. Without triggering the alarms. Naruto just nodded. I've been learning a lot about what all the symbols and stuff mean and how to not make things explode. I still don't know what half of them did, but I thought I'd give it a try, you know. See if I could figure it out. Unlike Iruka, the Hokage knew the specializations of all the shinobi in his village. And while it was heartwarming to know that Naruto was following in the footsteps of his parents, even accidentally, and apparently his instincts for the art were quite good, the only seal master still alive, Jiraiya, was not currently in the village. Naruto, where have you been learning seals? Naruto's heart dropped into his stomach. This was the one person that Kurama told him that he should tell the truth to if asked, but he didn't expect it to be so soon. Kurama-sensei, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen paused. Not at the name, though he did not recognize it, which was a problem in itself. But Naruto hadn't actually called him Hokage-sama for years. Maybe ever. Naruto felt guilty about something. His thoughts firmly on the subject of Mizuki's betrayal, he asked the question. Who is he? Does he live in the village? An answer, Naruto just pointed at his stomach in silence. Directly at the 8 trigram seal under his shirt. He very carefully set his tea back on its saucer. What? Hiruzen asked calmly. Naruto still felt the tension regardless and immediately was on the defensive. I know he attacked the village and stuff, but he's a lot different now. And nicer. Well, he's at least nice to me, you know. Hiruzen wasn't entirely sure what to think. An angry and raging Kyuubi was to be expected. A Kyuubi bent on turning Naruto against the village was everything he feared, though he took solace in the notion that it was unlikely for Naruto to be old enough for the beast to make contact. A Kyuubi that was acting nice in that same effort was even less likely, but infinitely more dangerous. The Kyuubi that was not only trying to be friendly with Naruto, but teaching him the very thing that locked it away to begin with. Teaching him a name that even he hadn't heard. Of course, the name could be fake, but it was still alarming. And yet Naruto knew that it was indeed the Kyuubi and that it had attacked the village on the day he was born. Perhaps even who died in the attack, based on the odd expression on his face. It didn't make sense even for a schemer like the fox. He had a healthy fear now, even more than before. He was fairly certain he could no longer count on anything he could have planned in advance. He had no idea how the fox would behave anymore, though it did not take him long to formulate his next question and his next test. At least Naruto still seemed to trust him in particular. About your sealing, what is it that you want to learn? What is your goal? He had watched Naruto since before he attended the academy. Unless something significant changed, he wasn't a boy to do something unless he had some sort of goal in mind. Like becoming Hokage, as difficult as that path would be for him. And it would give him a good idea of just how much the Kyuubi had influenced the boy. Well, at first, I wanted to figure out how to break my seal. Hiruzen struggled to keep his face neutral. But Kurama said that was a bad idea and wouldn't work anyway. Somebody named Jiraiya has the key. And nobody would trust him anyway unless I got really strong where people thought I could handle him. Curiouser and curiouser. Even he didn't know that. Handle him? What do you mean? Well, like, strong enough where he wouldn't take over if the seal wasn't there. He looked up from his stomach. That was the plan, right? Not one I knew about. What makes you say that? Well, the seal was made loose. What? His efforts to remain neutral had failed utterly. I looked at what the seal was supposed to look like in that scroll. Naruto jabbed a thumb at the case behind him. And it was loose. Not by that much, but it looked like it was done on purpose. Kurama thinks so too. Hiruzen grumbled internally. It would have been nice to be informed of these plans. But his anger faded when he realized who it was that made these plans and Jireya's state of mind directly after the incident. If Jireya had even known. The plan could have easily been spur of the moment on the fourth's part. So what is your plan? Well, Naruto blushed. I know it's kinda stupid, but I wanted to make a new seal. One that, like, projects his chakra from my body so he doesn't have to be trapped anymore. Hiruzen's eyes sharpened. But, like, only lets us give each other chakra, but prevents taking it. So people don't get really worried and stuff. I see. So if the Kyuubi actually went on a rampage, Naruto could literally just deny him access through his body. Though the phrase give each other chakra was still a little worrying. But even Kurama doesn't know how to do that, so I don't know how I'm gonna do it. And I'd still need the key, you know. I'll send a message to Jireya. Naruto gasped. That doesn't give you permission to try. That's for him to decide. And it would be good to have a seal master actually look over what he was being taught. Just in case the fox was playing the long game from an angle he hadn't anticipated. His smile only wavered slightly before reasserting itself. Thanks Jiji. You're the best. At that moment, the door slammed open and Iruka rushed in. Hokage-sama. Mizuki was arrested and I think Naruto is missing. Hi Iruka-sensei. It appears, Naruto, that your presence has been missed. Iruka rushed over and quickly checked him for injuries. Naruto. What happened? I heard that you were seen with Mizuki, but I couldn't find you anywhere. Oh. So my clones dispelled themselves already. Yeah. He told me about a secret different way to graduate, but he was lying, so I beat him up with a new jutsu I learned from that scroll. He pointed at the case. Iruka paled and looked at the Hokage nervously. Hiruzen just nodded. Don't worry. It was nothing too dangerous for the boy to learn, given his situation. The multi-shadow clone jutsu was only classified as a kenjutsu due to its extensive chakra cost. He blinked in surprise. Shadow clones. But clones were the only thing that he seemed to have any significant trouble with at the academy. Hiruzen gave him a significant look. Those with naturally large chakra reserves often have great trouble with chakra control. Naruto cleared his throat nervously, looking at his teacher. So, if that wasn't the secret way to pass, I still have to go back to the academy next year, don't I? After a quick glance at the Hokage, Iruka smiled. Well, they weren't conventional clones, and they were a little late, but I think it counts, don't you? Of course, beating up a Chunin had a little to do with his opinion of Naruto's ability to become a ninja, but he wasn't about to tell that to the boy and give him any ideas. Even stealing the scroll might have done it, really. But he couldn't be too sure that the Hokage hadn't just let him take it. He liked Naruto himself, but the Hokage tended to like him a little more than what was safe. Sure, Iruka had quite a bit more perspective on Naruto's behavior than he did when Naruto first entered his class, but he wouldn't have even trusted himself with such an object as a kid. Not to mention what Mizuki the traitor could have done with it. But seeing Naruto's shining eyes looking up at him, he could kind of understand. Come on, kid. Let's go get some ramen. This is a big moment, don't you think? Iruka was impressed. It was of course to be expected that Naruto was particularly excited. He got to be treated by his teacher to his favorite food and he even got his sensei's own headband. He didn't even seem to be particularly bothered that it was all scratched up and used. Iruka wasn't someone who saw the value in polishing something that would only make you more visible. In fact, if he didn't know any better, he'd say Naruto liked it even more, as his fingers traced the scrapes more than once before he actually tied it around his head. No, it wasn't that. It was what he ordered. Now, Iruka knew that Naruto loved ramen. Most of his lunches were ramen, and he even knew from the Hokage himself that this was his favorite restaurant, as well as the only one that would have him. But when he asked for custom toppings, they were rather strange. Not necessarily bad. Just strange for a 12-year-old. Especially since Iruka knew what food pills were made of. They certainly would be a bit of a strange combination. Even Tucci looked surprised. Well, that was more likely due to the fact that Naruto only ate 3 bowls, even when it was all being paid for. But Iruka knew a little of why they might be a little more filling. It was just as well, because those bowls were at least twice as expensive as normal. Naruto, what you did was impressive, and you do deserve to graduate, but I don't want you to do something like that again, do you hear me? Naruto looked up from his bowl. Huh. Okay, yeah. If you had come to me and talked about it, we could have avoided this whole thing. He sighed. Yeah. I feel a little stupid about all this. I mean, to even get that scroll thing, I had to disable a whole load of seals, and I know that's something you didn't teach in class. I should have stopped then, but I just couldn't give up, you know? Everybody respects ninja, and Naruto glanced at Iruka's worried expression and seemed to understand almost immediately. I know what's inside me. I know why everybody doesn't like me. But if I'm a ninja, or maybe only once I become Hokage it's a chance, you know? I have to take it. I have to show people I can do it. Protect everyone, you know. Maybe people will like me then. Iruka opened his mouth slightly, a little unsure what to say. Eventually he just leaned in and gave a small hug. Naruto gasped softly. I'm sure I've been nothing but your overly strict teacher. But just remember that you still have people that look out for you, Naruto. Remember that for me, okay? Alright, Iruka-sensei. I will. Naruto's smile didn't show his teeth, but he kept it all the way until he tucked himself into bed. Naruto was not a morning person, and that did not change during his years at the academy. It took him at least 30 minutes to wake fully. So in order to not be late to class every single day he attended, he compensated by starting the process earlier. It didn't make the process any more fun, but it helped him get yelled at less often. It also helped him actually wake up early enough to catch something for breakfast if he forgot the night before. Which was an embarrassingly common occurrence. He couldn't even blame Kurama for not reminding him, since he never actually had to eat anything, even when he wasn't sealed. He just liked to. But right now, he was cursing that habit since he didn't actually have class. In fact, he wouldn't even be assigned a Jounin sensei until the day after tomorrow. Come on, Kit. We have work to do. Naruto groaned. Training again. Can't I have one day off? I thought you would be excited to get rid of that crappy handbag. Naruto found himself very suddenly upright in bed. You think I'm ready? You tell me. Now come on and grab a clean scroll. Unless you want to eat first. His earlier fatigue was completely clear and with a single bounce on the mattress, pushed himself not just into an upright position, but at a decent pace toward his ninja gear. No. I can eat later. I've been waiting way too long for this already. The scroll Naruto had reserved for this purpose wasn't all that big. Weight was always a precious commodity for ninja on the move. Or at least that's what Kurama kept telling him every time he complained about carrying his bag. Water was especially difficult and the most often needed on a mission. So a canteen of the stuff was going to be the first accessible sealed item. More could be added later. Which was kin to the other reason for using a small scroll. He had several places to strap them on his outfit as needed. Unfortunately, he had to carry all his extra exploding tags the traditional way. Storing a seal in another seal was not a good idea, to say the least. Even with the inactive ones, he didn't really want to risk it. Then there was the sorts of items that didn't really need to be on hand all the time, but were useful if something went wrong. Those went in there too. Like fire-starting materials. Or a sleeping bag. A large portion of waterproof cloth. Some rope. Food pills in case he had to travel somewhere that didn't have anything readily available to eat. And finally, he added some spots for extra shuriken and kunai. Which he currently did not own, other than a few dozen of each in rather cruddy condition that he swiped from training fields over the years. And a few of better quality he snuck out of class when they were practicing with real weapons. We'll go shopping later, Naruto. Go snipe a bird or something for breakfast. You're supposed to complete your registration in less than an hour, right? So there was a deadline today. Thanks Kurama. I completely forgot about that. Naruto rolled up the scroll and tucked it into one of the straps he had sewn to the front of his uniform, slipping the brush into the receptacle on his arm. He smirked. Alright. Let's do this. Naruto, you need a shower. Aw, come on. The actual registration process was easier than Naruto was expecting. A lot less annoying, too, given the fact that paperwork was involved. But Kurama made sure he always knew things like his height, weight, and stuff like that. Something to do with training, he didn't bother to pay that much attention. And Kurama hadn't yelled at him for it, so it probably didn't matter that he didn't know the reason. The rest of the questions were a weird kind of personality test, but that was also kinda easy, since it wasn't like he was trying to be somebody else. And there was an official photo thing to be put on the graduation yearbook thing. It was just as stuffy as all the other years, but this one was more important or something. He wore Iruka's headband for that one. Oh, and Jiji's stupid grandson tried to do a sneak attack in the middle of everything. Okay, maybe he's not stupid, just really annoying. It's his teacher that's stupid. I hope he doesn't pick up his teacher's stupidness. But he still had the rest of the day to do a proper shopping trip. Naruto hadn't really had one of those for a long time. Maybe once or twice he went out to buy some milk, or sometimes he ran out of ramen for school lunches, which wasn't often he bought in bulk. Maybe he bought some ink or paper. None of those were particularly expensive. Even his visits to Ichiraku ramen were infrequent enough that his Gama-chan was quite full from his monthly stipend. Enough where he had to store some of his money elsewhere. And he needed the money. Proper ninja tools were not inexpensive. He wasn't even being overcharged, either. The Kunoichi merchant was actually nice to him for some reason. Plus, he watched other ninja buy their stuff and it was the same as the prices he was being told. So he wasn't being obtuse just because she was pretty. Of course, he was buying everything with the highest possible quality metal. And in triplicate. So Gama-chan was already getting pretty empty. Naruto was starting to understand Kurama's insistence that he not go out to eat whenever he could afford it. No, Kit, I just said that so your special reward would remain something special. Oh. Naruto's eyes drifted over the rest of the merchandise. There were several weapon shops like this one that catered to the village's largely ninja population, but this was the one that Kurama recommended to him. In retrospect, that might have been why the shopkeeper seemed so nice. Kurama seemed really good at reading people. But passing over all sorts of weapons that he had absolutely no training in, his attention drifted almost immediately as soon as he saw seal script. Hey, how much do the paper bombs cost? He had at least 50 in his pocket already, but he was curious. If his money ran out this fast, he might want to sell some stuff eventually. The woman chuckled. Sorry, but you need a license to use those. Naruto's mouth fell open. Wait, I was just told that they couldn't be sold to academy students. She looked at him strangely. Well, yes. That would be the natural thing to do. Naruto shook his head. No, what I mean is, I've been making my own for years. Naruto grabbed a literal handful from his pocket. Where do I get this license, Stingy? The woman paled, staring at his hand. Naruto shoved them back in. Don't worry, none of these are charged. I only do that if I think I'll need to use them. She let out a silent breath. Just ask around at the administration building. I'm sure someone there will help you. Naruto quickly took his new purchases and left before things got any more awkward. Kurama. Why didn't you tell me about any of this? Stealing a few chipped kunai is fine and all, but I don't want to be arrested. Don't blame me, brat. How would I know about stuff like that? This time, registration was not nearly as simple. Neither was the paperwork. Neither was explaining to half the building that he had been handling large amounts of explosives for years. Practically every person he talked to left a few shades lighter. Fortunately, in Kurama's opinion, despite needing a separate license, all that was needed was a short written test on the proper handling of the bombs. Naruto still hated it, but the fox thought it was a good thing, overall, that they had not asked for a practical demonstration. Naruto liked to be creative in his use of the things. Creative enough where he was sure that the higher-ups would be a lot more hesitant about the little Jinchuriki having access to the things. More than they already were, at least. Nobody quite forgot the days where he incessantly pranked the entirety of Konoha. The Hokage, when contacted, just smiled with a twinkle in his eye. Bastard. What? Nothing. He did learn that explosive tags, charged, that is, were actually rather expensive. Most genin didn't bother with more than a few for that very reason. So the test for handling them was very dull and very stupid. Kurama helped him through it by wording things in a less stupid way. In the end, the test was equally annoying for both of them. It also ate up the rest of the day getting someone willing to proctor the test. It was Iruka, by the way. On his day off. He did not appreciate the complaining. He did, however, appreciate being given a stack of the things on the way out. Incidentally, this was how he figured out how expensive explosive tags were supposed to be. Naruto enjoyed his day of rest. It was odd. Kurama didn't even try to get him to do anything. He hadn't given him an actual day like this in, well, ever. Okay, technically Kurama couldn't make Naruto do anything. But he always seemed to know exactly what to say to guilt him into doing whatever he wanted. Now he could do whatever he wanted. Okay, so what he wanted pretty much amounted to seeing what sorts of new and interesting pranks he could play with his new ninja skills. Henge became his new favorite jutsu almost immediately. Probably because pranking anybody below Chunin with lethal weaponry was a bad idea even he could see a mile away. And using non-lethal weaponry scared the hell out of civilians in a way that wasn't very fun. Making a few shadow clones that could turn into practically any object. Almost no cost, infinite opportunity. The only annoyance was when his other selves invariably came up with better ideas than he did and decided to change things on the fly. Or started pranking him instead. But at the end of the day, he really was looking forward to tomorrow. The time when he'd get an actual Jounin sensei and go on missions for real. Damn it, I forgot about this part. Kurama tuned out what was happening around Naruto. He couldn't really trust himself to comment. Naruto's male hormones were starting to kick in and Sakura was the main target. Despite a clear lack of interest or tact on her part. Yet he also knew that she would eventually mellow out and be a generally decent person and team member. And he hated Uchiha Sasuke just about as much as Naruto did right now, but if they ended up on the same team again, well Naruto had turned him around, maybe the same could be done for Sasuke before he went all missing nin and got all the stupid ideas about revenge at all costs and later on, peace at all costs. Naruto's vision was even stupider, peace and none of the costs, but it was working. At least it was before everything went to hell. That had nothing to do with Naruto's ideals, though. His ideals were quite simply the only reason that everything had gone as well as it did. The last thing he needs right now is my cynical nonsense messing that up. Next, Team 7. Haruno Sakura, Uzumaki Naruto, and Uchiha Sasuke. So, the same team, huh? Probably same sensei, too. I knew that balance stuff was nonsense. So what's the real reason? Of course, Sasuke is a no-brainer. Kakashi is the only remaining Sharingan user in the village, and Sasuke was a member of the main family. It would be expected that the Dijutsu would manifest in him, and he would need coaching. Naruto, well, it was likely that someone wanted to keep an eye on him. Kakashi, while nothing compared to the power thrown around during the war, was likely the strongest jounin at this time. Sakura, well, the village seems to like splitting up the Kunoichi. Probably due to a tendency for them to have better chakra control. Or something. Maybe it's due to the fact that hormones seem to pit them against each other around this age, and forming a team with more than one is a challenge. Anyway, it was high time for a nap. Naruto groaned. He had been waiting for more than an hour, Sasuke was being a jerk like always, and Sakura was ignoring him completely. He didn't know why it would have been any different today, but he was nothing if not optimistic. He was also really bored. So he started doodling on a slip of paper. Whoever this stupid Hada Kakashi is, he's going to be in for it. Kakashi understood the Hokage's reasoning. He really did. But he still wasn't happy about it. Every year he was assigned a team with great potential, but absolutely no concept of teamwork, just for the chance that he would be able to change that. Unlike the other times, though, this team came with consequences for failure. If he didn't wholeheartedly agree with the other team assignments, he would have demanded that it be changed to something more suitable. And if it actually worked, this team had quite the effective potential. Teams this hard-hitting were rare. Probably for this exact reason. Strength seems to have an inverse relationship with mental stability. Kakashi stopped by the entrance to Iruka's classroom, pausing to hear the conversation inside. Naruto. Grow up. What? That's what he gets for making us wait so long. I'm bored. So sue me. Our sensei is a jounin, Naruto. He's an elite ninja. He's not going to fall for something like that. So the little prankster is setting traps. Well, I'm not one to pass up a first impression. He walked calmly through the door and was immediately pummeled with sandals. Naruto's, given his bare feet. The paper strip taped to the inside of the doorframe was a good clue as to where they came from. It was a solid trap. Not one he would have actually had trouble with, but he was more interested in the new team's reactions. Sakura was cringing and apologizing for Naruto's actions. Yet he noticed that she made no effort to actually stop him physically despite her verbal protests. Naruto was just laughing at him. And Uchiha Sasuke was glaring at him, completely failing his little impromptu test. Yeah, this was going great. And how shall I put this? Based on my first impression, I'd have to say I hate you. Ah, that was better. They seemed to all understand that he was still instrumental in their upcoming ninja career. Meet me on the roof. Kurama supposed that he shouldn't have been quite as surprised that though Naruto's aspirations to become Hokage were unchanged, the rest of his likes and dislikes were quite different. Well, at least the internal ones, he told Kurama. The ones he actually said out loud. He used to annoy Kakashi as much as possible. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like being honest with my comrades. I like it even better when they are honest with me. I hate it when comrades use the opportunity to get to know me to give me stupid tests. And my dream is to one day become a better shinobi than Hokage-sama and gain that position myself. Naruto had trouble keeping a straight face as Kurama rolled around their shared mindscape, laughing his tails off. Kakashi blinked a few times. I see. Sakura gaped openly at the boy next to her. Even Sasuke gave him a sidelong glance. My hobbies? I guess I like setting up pranks. And I like training, even when it's really hard. Kakashi nodded. Next. It was more of the same. This was one of the few moments that Kurama had actually paid attention to this early when he was here the last time. It seemed that whatever Kurama had done in Naruto's life, it hadn't affected the other two enough to make much of a difference. Though Sasuke gave Naruto a lot fewer dismissive looks. Sakura was just as oblivious and hyper-focused on Sasuke as ever. Kurama was proud of his student. Not only did he prepare far more thoroughly for what Kakashi had described as a survival exercise, he had also caught his lie about it not being wise to eat beforehand. Okay, it probably had something to do with a lack of trust with his introduction yesterday. Still, a more suspicious Naruto was an alive Naruto. Even though he knew that Kakashi wasn't actually that bad. Naruto. You're late. Naruto waved at Sakura and Sasuke as he walked out of the woods. Nope. Kakashi-sensei is late. So I set up traps all over the place. Come on, I'll tell you where all of them are. Kakashi watched from the bushes. Of course, he knew that Naruto was doing this as he was doing precisely the same thing. Though perhaps not quite so enthusiastically. Does he already know what we are doing here today? I did say that it would be a survival test against me, but that sort of thing is a lot different from what they did at the academy. And with just how many explosives he was using and how fast he was setting them, it was actually not possible for him to keep him inside at all times. Even if he tried, there was no guarantee that he hadn't been doing this since before he got there. It would significantly hinder his mobility. Either his paranoia rivaled his own, or Naruto actually respected his skill despite falling for his earlier trap. They were only genin, though, fresh from the academy. They would still require teamwork if they wanted to get anywhere near him, traps or no. Out of all of them, Naruto seemed to be the only one that instinctively understood the concept of teamwork. Case in point, he was already notifying them of the traps he set, despite their clear lack of interest. Even if he failed the team, he would make sure that the boy got apprenticed rather than sent back to the academy. "Good morning, class." The response was universal. "You're late." Kakashi ignored them, sitting a clock on a tree stump. "I've set this alarm to go off at noon." "Right here," he raised a hand. "I have 2 small bells. You must steal them from me before the timer sounds. Anyone who fails doesn't get any lunch. Instead, you will be tied to that tree stump where I will eat your lunch in front of you." Out of the 3 of them, only Naruto seemed unaffected by this information. He certainly turned out interesting. I wonder if he called my bluff again. All you need is a single bell. But since there aren't enough to go around, well, one of you is definitely headed for the stump. Whoever that is will be the first one to fail. On your way back to school and disgrace. Naruto frowned, studying him carefully. "You may, if you so choose, use shuriken and other sharpened weaponry. Attack me with the intent to kill, or you won't stand a chance." Sakura immediately protested. "But that's dangerous." "Why would?" Naruto waved her off, still frowning. "No, he's serious. That's why I set so many traps. This guy's an elite ninja. He's not gonna get hurt for real, you know." Sasuke gave him a sidelong glance. "Did you know of this test beforehand?" Naruto shrugged. "I guessed. He said it was a survival test against him, so I figured we'd be fighting." "HN." He rolled his eyes. "Guys, I don't think any of us will be able to get a bell on our own. I certainly can't." Sakura immediately looked at Sasuke. "Do you want to team up with me? We can each get a bell," and she trailed off. Sasuke just looked vaguely annoyed. Naruto groaned. "I mean, we all need to work together. Have any of you tried to prank a jounin?" He got a few blank stares. "I gave up, by the way. It just doesn't happen." Sasuke frowned. "Then what was that in the classroom yesterday?" Naruto shrugged. "I was bored. I didn't think it would actually work." Kakashi stood off to the side, bemused. On one hand, more teamwork was being suggested than he honestly expected from any team. On the other, they had completely forgotten that he was right next to them. It did work, though. "We can take this guy." "Sakura, we can't assume that. Ninja lie all the time. Lie about getting hit with a sandal." He groaned again. "That's not what I meant." Sasuke cut in. "There are only 2 bells. Why should all 3 of us help when one will automatically fail?" Naruto had actually caught on to Kakashi's ruse a few minutes ago. When Kakashi said that only 9 were allowed to pass, he noticed quite quickly that the number suspiciously aligned with the 3-man teams they were organized into. He didn't actually know what the deal with his test was or why he was doing it, but he had a feeling that he would not appreciate Naruto ruining the entire thing by letting everyone know that teams were likely only passed or failed in groups. So instead, he tried a different tactic. "Okay, you 2 will get the bells. I'm still helping out, though." Naruto always prided himself on his ability to cause long, awkward silences. Confused awkward silences were even better. "Why?" Sasuke asked suspiciously. He already had an excuse ready. "I'm going to be Hokage no matter when I graduate." Naruto scratched the back of his neck. "Besides, it looks like I'm the only one who actually ate breakfast." He paused, looking back at Kakashi. "Oh, sensei. It's not allowed to eat during the test, is it?" Kakashi blinked. "No, it is not." "What about food pills?" "Unless they are soldier pills and a part of your attack strategy, no." "Aren't?" Naruto looked back. "Yeah, so I'm the best one for the tying up thing." "I don't trust you." "Why?" Sasuke glared at him. "You're taking all of this far too calmly. You have something planned." "I know it. How can either of us trust you from not just stealing a bell from us once we get them? After all, you seem quite confident that we are much weaker than him." Naruto glanced at the clock. It was 10:14. They had a little less than 2 hours. More than enough time. "Okay, if you 2 really want to try first, go ahead. Just don't tire yourselves out completely, otherwise we'll have no chance at all." Naruto received glares from both sides now. Kakashi cleared his throat. "You know, you 3 can start whenever you're ready." Sasuke glanced at Sakura. "Don't get in the way." Sakura hesitantly nodded, and a second later, both of them rushed into the woods on either side of their teacher. Naruto sat down in the grass and leaned back on his elbows. When around 10 seconds passed and nothing was happening, Kakashi reached into his pouch and pulled out a book, which he began to read leisurely. Shuriken flew out from the trees and appeared to hit him solidly and with an almost disturbing amount of blood. "No, Naruto, that is the normal amount of blood. You kill animals all the time. You should know this." But the image of Kakashi disappeared in a puff of smoke and a shuriken-ridden log dropped to the ground. "You're a ninja." You have to get used to blood, even from a human target. I know. It's just not what I expected. I need to learn that substitution jutsu. Despite his recent shock, Naruto already had at least 6 good ideas. And the 10 minutes he spent sitting in the grass only gave him more. You need to learn the shunin first. And for that you need better chakra control. What? Oh, yeah. I kinda get it. You need to be fast enough to substitute stuff without people noticing. Naruto groaned and sat up. He knew that he said he would let his teammates try to attack Kakashi-sensei on their own, but something about the silence didn't feel right. Alright. Sakura first. Now, where are you? It didn't take too long for him to track her down, as she did not seem to be masking her trail very well. Besides, she was still wearing perfume. Okay, he liked the actual perfume, but even he had to admit it was kinda stupid for a ninja. He didn't really think he could actually say that out loud to her, though. A scream rang out and his face hardened. Okay, enough is enough. It is unlikely that your sensei actually harmed her severely. I know, but think, Kit. Naruto came quickly upon Sakura, crumpled haphazardly on the ground. She had no visible injuries. Right, Jinjutsu. Naruto remembered that from class. None of it was actually taught at the academy, just ways to fight it. But the subject was a lot less interesting when Kurama mentioned that with him inside, he was practically immune. And actually using it required very precise chakra control. But to wake up a teammate was simple. Hi. Naruto pushed a palm into her back and released a large burst of unfocused chakra. Sakura's eyes popped open. What? Where's Sasuke? Naruto helped her up. Jinjutsu. What did you see? Sasuke, the context was not hard to figure out from the expression on her face. I guess I'm not the only one that was a little freaked out to see Kakashi like that. Don't worry, Kakashi's our sensei. Even if we fail, I don't think he'll go that far. Sakura looked at him closely. Why did you help me? I thought you were going to wait until we failed. Her eyes widened. Did we fail? Naruto shook his head. No. I just got impatient. Only a little true. How did you get separated? Sakura looked down. I'm not as fast as Sasuke is. Don't worry about it. Now, we'll need a plan against this guy. Anything you notice about him? She sighed. Not really. I don't know how much of it was real if I got caught in a jinjutsu. I do know he's fast, though. I knew ninja could be powerful, but it's the first time I've seen it in person. Naruto nodded. Alright. Then a simple plan will be fine. I'll distract him, you and Sasuke get the bells. Sakura looked away slightly. I don't think Sasuke really likes working with other people. Well, he still wants to get a bell, so that's what he'll already be doing. I'm sure he'll listen to me if he already wants to do the thing I'm telling him. And you still want both of us to get the bells. Sure. Getting Sakura to look underneath would have to come later. He could already hear the sounds of fighting. Boom. Whoa. Wow, fire jutsu. I knew Sasuke was good, but I didn't expect that. Naruto shook his head. That wouldn't matter to a ninja like Kakashi. Fire jutsu were better used for area denial or distraction, rather than direct damage due to their slow travel time. He was still kinda annoyed that Kurama didn't let him learn any elemental jutsu yet. It was not like it was hard to steal stuff from the library. Stay in the trees, Sakura. I'll distract him. You'll know when to attack. He almost went to go, but paused and looked back. But just in case, don't start until something explodes. She nodded. Right. He walked out into the clearing where Sasuke's head was sticking out of the ground. Likely an earth jutsu. Kakashi. Come out and fight me like a man. He grinned, raising a fist to the sky. As soon as Kakashi walked out to admonish him, he formed a seal. Hokage Bunshin no Jutsu. Around 50 clones poofed into existence around him and most of them rushed immediately at his teacher. Naruto himself with the help of a few more pulled Sasuke out of the ground. Changed my mind. Distraction. Wait for the explosion. Sasuke glared at him, but nodded. In the chaos, a few clones escaped into the forest. Naruto grinned and launched into the ongoing attack with the rest of his clones. Even with his higher than average Taijutsu ability, they were getting poofed right and left. Naruto expected this. He also planned on getting his non-clone ass handed to him. He was counting on it, in fact. So when a clone circled around into Kakashi's blind spot rigged with about 20 exploding tags, his attention would be on lecturing what he knew for a fact to be the real Naruto, who was conveniently just outside the explosion radius. Kakashi barely got singed. But that was also to be expected. It was his throbbing headache and ringing ears that were the real advantage. And he took time to compliment Naruto on his trap. Teachers were so easy to predict. So between his dulled senses, disorientation and current distraction, Sakura was able to be just sneaky enough to grab the bells and toss one to a distinctly annoyed Sasuke. Kakashi rubbed his head. Good one. Sasuke still glared at the kunoichi. I could have done that too. I know. I just felt like I should contribute something. And if I failed, I'm sure you could have done it even when he was a bit more aware. Kakashi ignored them and gave a significant look to Naruto. You know what this means for you, don't you? Naruto nodded, a slight smile on his face. Kakashi sighed. This kid is going to be the death of me. Naruto smiled as he stood up, tied with rope to the thick wooden post, and his teammates ate beside him. Their sensei was nowhere to be found, probably off eating his own lunch, but he wasn't worried. Sasuke growled. I don't get you. Why are you so happy? Why did you help me? Why did you help both of us get the bells like that? You're going to get sent back to the academy with nothing to show. Sakura cringed. I hate to say it, but you helped me so much back there I don't think I would have had a chance without you there. And that thing you did with your clones, you shouldn't be the one that gets sent back to the academy. Even though that would mean that I would lose this golden opportunity with Sasuke. Arg, this isn't fair. Naruto looked at each of them in turn. Sakura Sasuke, did you stop to consider why they divided the class into teams? Sakura frowned. Well, there aren't enough jounin to teach us all individually. And you said earlier, this test wouldn't be possible without all three of us. Have you ever heard of a ninja taking a mission alone? Okay, sure, only one ninja might survive. Sakura cringed and Naruto kicked himself mentally, remembering the Jinjutsu. Not the time. But even the Hokage has advisors. Ninja are stronger when they work together. I work better alone. Others just get in my way. Naruto just gave Sasuke a glance. He didn't have to say anything. It communicated his thoughts perfectly. And just where did that get you? That's when you help your comrades get stronger. More than physical training, that was the core of what Kurama was trying to teach him. Of course, this Naruto didn't realize that much of the curriculum was ripped directly from his own older self's mind. He probably wouldn't have needed teaching if Naruto at this point even knew what a comrade was. Everybody ignored him other than the Hokage, Kurama, and later, Iruka sensei. But he was getting closer and closer to gaining two more, and he wasn't going to give up when that goal was still in sight. Sakura was rather naive, but she was the sort of book-smart Naruto wasn't. And aside from her good looks, he was starting to see the beginnings of if not friendship, at least mutual respect, something he got from few classmates. And Sasuke, well, as much as he wanted to hate him, he was the only other classmate that understood the meaning of pain. He was still an ass, though. Sasuke's arm stretched out, half of his meal still in his hand. Naruto blinked. What? Are you giving that to me? His stomach growled, and Sasuke hadn't retracted his arm. You need that more than I do. I ate my breakfast. Besides, what if Kakashi-sensei sees you? I'm already full. Sasuke didn't say anything else. Thanks. Sakura looked down at her own empty meal. Sorry, I'd give you some of mine, too, but Naruto chuckled in between bites. I get it. I'll be fine with this. She smiled sheepishly. Maybe I shouldn't have been dieting so much. Sasuke glanced at Naruto. That doesn't completely explain the test. If it was designed with teams in mind, why only 2 bells? Boom. Kakashi appeared in front of them in an explosion of smoke and wind, an expression of utter fury on his face. You. Pass. Sakura blinked rapidly. Naruto smirked. Sasuke nodded. Kakashi's expression changed from livid to mild cheer in an instant. Naruto here has the right idea. The rest of you have taken your first big step in the correct direction. Before now, you have followed my instructions to the letter, without question. You are indeed taught to follow orders. But a true shinobi seeks for hidden meanings within hidden meanings. You must look underneath the underneath. Naruto glanced at his stomach suspiciously. I know, Kit. I plagiarized. So sue me. In the ninja world, those who break the rules are scum. But those who abandon their friends are worse than scum. Sakura gasped. Oh. Sasuke glanced between them, then nodded. This exercise is now concluded. You all pass. That will be all for today. Team 7, your duties start tomorrow. Naruto groaned, rubbing the fading scratches across his face and neck. Ugh, I hate D-rank missions. They're, like, chores, but a lot more annoying. You do get paid. Quite generously for how easy they are. Ma, I would think you would be all for this sort of thing, Naruto. Naruto looked at his teacher strangely. What? Why? Kakashi shrugged. You're the one that lectured the rest of the team about the importance of working together. Surely you don't expect that to come instantly. Okay, Naruto could kind of see that now. Besides, you get paid to do it. At the same time, neither of his teammates seemed to care that much about money, and with the way Sasuke's scowl was directed at Kakashi, it seemed that he felt the same way as Naruto did. While they were certainly getting better at working together and even gaining some practical experience with group ninja protocol, they weren't exactly getting stronger, either. And now that they all knew what a ninja like Kakashi was capable of, they had to work together to even touch him. For goodness sake, they were all painfully aware of just how far behind they were. Sasuke for his revenge against his brother, Naruto for his goal of Hokage, and Sakura because she had very suddenly realized that practical skills were much more important than theoretical knowledge in an actual mission, even if Naruto kept insisting that she was valuable and important to the team. Naruto looked up. "Hey, sensei. Can we take a break from missions and work on training?" Kakashi blinked. Sasuke shot him a grateful look. "We can still do teamwork stuff, but we get stronger, so we can do better missions. There may come a time when you are grateful for a D rank." Kakashi was still unsure just how Naruto managed to buy the kind of ninja tools he was using without money from any D ranks. He must either have been the most frugal 12-year-old he had ever met or he wasn't eating well. He should probably look into that. Yeah, but that's not now. It's not like older ninja can't do D ranks, right? Can we go do training or not? I really want to learn stuff like the shunin. The Kawarimi, the replacement jutsu, was his original interest in the technique, but Kurama had been telling him stories about his father and how certain ninja used it. Nobody actually knew his father's much superior Hiraishin technique or how it worked other than with seals, but using chakra to enhance his speed, even if it was only for a second, was invaluable. Especially if he got good enough to use it in combat. Only if your teammates agree. Sasuke gave a short nod. Sakura hesitated a bit more, looking at each of them, before nodding as well. "I see. Training it is, then. Meet me at the 5th training ground in 5 minutes." For once, Kakashi wasn't late. And this time, he wasted no time messing around. "You might think that I am here to teach you 3 new jutsu." He looked pointedly at Naruto. "You would be incorrect." "Why not?" Kakashi leaned up against a tree. "Because you still need to learn the basics." There was a round of general indignation. Even Sakura didn't look happy. "But sensei, none of us were slouches in the academy. Even Naruto passed the written tests and I've gotten a lot better at sparring." "Hey. I'm not trying to insult you, Naruto, you're just more of a physical learner. The academy does not teach nearly enough." 3 sets of eyes jumped back to their teacher. "That's my opinion, anyways. Standards fall in time of peace, yada yada. The point is, well, the academy teaches the basics of weapon usage and hand-to-hand combat quite well, it barely touches on ninjutsu at all, and jinjutsu even less. It teaches just the bare minimum of chakra control. Just enough to find it. Only the basics of using it. So today we're going to be climbing trees." Naruto turned his attention inward. "Chakra control. You said I'm terrible at that. You do need the practice." And he's right. You need it if you want to be any good at ninjutsu. "But can't I learn?" "With shadow clones, the only thing you need to pay attention to is efficiency. You might create a few clones more or less than intended, but it's no big deal. You put too much chakra into a body flicker well, with your chakra levels and your lack of control, you'll run into a tree and die from the impact." Naruto gulped. "Right." He looked back up at his team, who looked just about as confused as he was about Kakashi's statement. Being stupidly vague was probably a sensei thing, Naruto reflected. "So how does climbing trees help with chakra control?" "I climb trees all the time, but I'm not very good at chakra control." "Simple. You aren't going to be using your hands." And with that, he very slowly but deliberately walked up the tree. Ah. Naruto was quite familiar with pushing himself off things with chakra. Most ninja did, even if in many academy students it wasn't entirely conscious. Sticking to something, however. "So how do we do that?" To the surprise of absolutely no one, Sakura got it in no time at all. It took her about 3 tries total. So she went off to do other training with Kakashi, while Naruto and Sasuke ran up trees over and over. It wasn't like Naruto was unaware of what he was doing wrong. Each time he failed, he knew that either he was slipping due to using pretty much no chakra or flying backwards because he was making small explosions beneath his feet. Something he did every day to get around. It was even more irritating that the gap between his and Sasuke's ability was only growing the longer they practiced. His occasional smug glances were a perfect motivator. And after Sasuke was done, it was even more of a shock to hear that they were learning water walking next. Naruto didn't even know that was a thing ninja could do. Naruto was there for a long time afterwards. Kakashi had actually called it a day quite a while ago, but Naruto had snuck back to the train almost immediately afterwards. "I can sleep in a tree when I'm done." The next day they were all falling into the lake together. As expected, Sakura was having much more success with this than either Naruto or Sasuke, but only Naruto really seemed to take the constant failure in stride. As Kakashi had explained, this was not a matter of learning the theory, studying the movement, and then executing the technique, as many low-level, and even more complex, jutsu required. This was about intuition as much as it was about chakra control. It also required a lot more control than the tree climbing stuff, so Naruto sucked at it even worse. He could stand on the water and even predict where he would need to direct his chakra, but actually moving it precisely enough to work was beyond him. It sucked, especially when Sakura finished and went off with Kakashi again, but Naruto could definitely see why they were doing it. He could only manage to keep his balance for about 3 seconds, but a quick test of his shadow clone technique showed him that the training was working already. The same amount of chakra produced almost twice as many clones. Of course, this meant that he would have to get used to the technique all over again, but the stark difference helped quite a bit with his motivation. Naruto was about to dispel his clones when Kurama stopped him. Wait. Your clones can manipulate the chakra you give them. Yeah, so? Sasuke looked at him strangely as he crawled back out of the lake again. Naruto's voice dropped. What are you getting at? You remember what your clones do. Duh. Put 2 and 2 together, idiot. Naruto frowned. He was used to this treatment, of course. Kurama didn't like to give straight answers, ever. When it came to training, that is. He stated his opinion on things quite bluntly otherwise. So what did he say? My clones can do jutsu and stuff, and I remember stuff when they go away. Naruto smacked himself in the forehead. Ah, right. Thanks, sensei. With another seal, the 10 clones already standing around were joined by 20 more. Enough to stand all along the lake's edge, but not enough to completely crowd Sasuke out and annoy him. Just don't give yourself chakra exhaustion. Drowning would be incredibly inconvenient. Sasuke himself raised an eyebrow at the new clones, but as soon as they started trying to walk on the lake, he simply nodded and ignored them again. Training was still annoying for Naruto, as half of the time, falling into the water would produce enough of an impact to knock out the clone. But it was a lot faster. This time, when Sasuke succeeded, Naruto was right behind him. Kakashi still refused to teach them a new jutsu, though. Not yet, at least. I want you two to think long and hard on what kind of shinobi you want to be. You both did well in the academy, so you should know that specialists come in all forms. Make sure you take your own current abilities in consideration. He turned to Sasuke. For example, though you do not have the Sharingan, it is likely that it will manifest at some point. Precision and control are key aspects. Jinjutsu as well, though the Sharingan's variants are often significantly different than traditional kinds. And Naruto. You have mastered the use of the Shadow Clone Jutsu to an impressive degree and have a chakra pool several times greater than my own. Naruto blinked. Wait, really? But you're super strong. You will likely be quite effective at using misdirection to make more powerful, but slower jutsu hit for more devastating effect. Naruto frowned. Well, that made sense and would actually be a rather useful strategy if he was meant to use some of the more complicated seals in combat. It wasn't what he had in mind. Still, sealing was his highest priority. At least until Kurama had a reasonable amount of freedom. No matter. Spend a good deal of time thinking about your decisions and meet me back here in the morning. And remember that honing your basic skills can be far more valuable than a new jutsu. What about Sakura? She hasn't started learning any jutsu, either. She recognizes her current weaknesses and is eliminating them. Though I believe she is beginning to understand where she wants to go. So, what about learning a basic jutsu? The ones I see all sorts of ninja using, like the shunin, you know. Kakashi looked at Naruto carefully. No. And with a puff of smoke, he was gone. What am I supposed to do now? I don't care. Go climb a cliff with one hand or something. You can't teach me more about sealing stuff. I already finished the storage seal. I need more if I'm gonna make that seal for you. Jiraiya will be likely arriving soon. He will be more equipped to teach you. Aside from some theory, I have very little practical seals for you to learn. Are you sure there isn't something else I can do to prepare? I want to do this as soon as I can, you know. Kurama sighed. Alright, there is one thing. I am unsure that when the seal's barriers are down, that you will be able to handle my chakra. Naruto frowned. What do you mean by that? Your chakra network has adapted to the chakra required to maintain my seal. However, it is not adapted to using my chakra, as I have not been actively trying to force my way out. There will be a time that I will be happy to lend you my full power, but it is likely that doing so would have drastic effects on your body. It is also uncertain to me where that lethal point would be. I like you, Naruto. Other ninja are a different matter, but I don't want you to die. Ever. He wasn't going to mention it to Naruto, or anyone for that matter, but a nagging thought had made its way into his head. He had never been dispelled before. He did not know what it was supposed to be like. The battlefield of the Fourth Great Shinobi War was full of space-time altering jutsu. He did not know what happened to send him back in time. If that Naruto was not back here with him, it was likely that he had died. Kurama didn't like thinking about the concept. Okay, so what do we do? The seal is still there. Simple. I start pushing out chakra. You train with it. Really? That's it. Yes. The difficulty is that I am a being of chakra. No matter how much I try to separate it, my will is going to inevitably be mixed in. So? I don't think there's a problem, you know. Naruto. I may no longer want to slaughter every ninja on the face of the planet, but I'm not easy to get along with. You will likely need to control my anger. Oh. Okay, yeah, I get it now. Even though Naruto had decided long ago to forgive the citizens of the village for the way they treated and continued to treat him, there were many occasions that Kurama's own anger was so intense that he felt himself struggle to unclench his fists at the sight of them. And if he hadn't even been pushing out any chakra, you have a strong will of your own. I have confidence that you will succeed. So, why didn't you start this training earlier? Because I am still unsure that I should be teaching you about this. Tools are meant to be used, and this particular one is too useful. In fact, the only reason I am considering such training is that I can enforce that you only use my power during training, or if your life is in real and immediate danger. Why not? Because I said so, that's why. Oh. Naruto still wasn't completely satisfied, but he had long learned that pressing further wasn't really in his best interest at this point. Kurama seemed to notice this. Listen, kid. I want us to be a team of two. I may be powerful, but in the shinobi world, there are no shortcuts. Or rather, there are, but they almost invariably lead to death. Or insanity. If you start throwing around my power and you don't have the skill to back it up, you're going to get caught off guard, die, and I won't be able to do a damn thing about it. But if you don't train using my power, you'll be in just as much trouble. So let's get going. Kurama-sensei, is it alright if I take a break for a few minutes? Kakashi-sensei. Do you know anything about sealing? I see that you have thought about your future. Though you may find that you struggle with sealing. Naruto frowned. Wait, really? Why? Chakra control. Most complex battle-ready seals require quite a lot of it. Though if you are creative enough with your clones and have quite a lot of spare ink, that may not be a problem. Certainly, your large reserves would be helpful as well. So should I do it or not? Kakashi gave a small shrug. That's up to you. Oh, and I can't teach you seals. There are a few people who know the basics, but I am not one of them. I know a few specific and useful seals, sure, but I won't be able to teach you in the proper way. There are no seal masters that currently live in the village. Naruto groaned. Ugh, I really don't want to wait for that Jiraiya guy. Is there anyone who knows anything beyond explosive tags and storage scrolls? Kakashi's eye flicked over the scroll tucked in his uniform and his mind went back to the many traps he had been setting before the bell test. Ah. So those were all homemade. Naruto's financial situation had shifted from make sure he isn't a kleptomaniac to vaguely worrying. He would be worried that Naruto had been practicing dangerous jutsu without instruction or supervision, but if he had gotten the attention of Jiraiya. Yeah, if you ever need some explosive tags, I can make them pretty easy. He nodded. You do have the chakra for it. You don't want to be paid. Naruto smirked. I may trade some for shunin training. Kakashi's eye hinted at his smile. I suppose that could be arranged. He turned to the lake. How long can you stay on the surface? Naruto understood. Kurama already told him that a lack of control with that particular jutsu was dangerous. I can stay however long I want and I can walk and stuff, but I don't think I could spar or anything like that. He shrugged. Good enough. The first thing you must understand is that while it might be relatively easy to increase your speed with chakra, increasing your perception speed or reaction time is almost impossible without some sort of bloodline limit. Therefore, the real difficulty of this jutsu is knowing where you are, where you want to be, and know exactly how much chakra you must channel, and for how long. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Oh. Yeah. It gets even more complex if you decide to use it for more than straight line distances. Significantly more dangerous. You will not use this on more than a flat plane until I say so, got it? Yes, sensei. Kakashi slipped his book back into his pouch. Now, the first step. Learning the shunin was frustrating, to say the least. As expected, Naruto constantly channeled too much chakra and went far more than intended. It wasn't like he physically couldn't channel less chakra, but unlike the much simpler clones, which he still had trouble with, this technique was complicated enough where he had to channel more to get it working at all. He could indeed channel less, but not very controllably. The technique would just fail. The second problem was he kept tripping. Even on flat ground, he traveled so fast that he had no time to react to anything or even just place his feet correctly. Idiot. Stop running. What? Kakashi looked up from his book. Did you say something, Naruto? Naruto grinned awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. No. What are you talking about? That's what I'm supposed to be doing. If you complain about the speed, just go slower. But you need to train your reaction speed. So go slower. Simple. Naruto tried again. There was a new furrow in the ground. Slower. He tried again. Take a leisurely walk. The hell? Just do it. You have to start somewhere. Naruto activated the jutsu, walking as slowly as his patience would allow. Due to his experiences in sealing, this was significantly slower than it was a year ago. He blurred 3 meters ahead. Hey. It worked. Kakashi looked up from his book, intrigued. Interesting strategy. Most ninja just jump until they get used to the speed. Naruto's face faltered. Seriously? I could have just done that the whole time. Trust me, Kit. This way is better. Don't you want to be able to fight at this speed? Yeah, I guess so. Just tell me when you're bored of practicing. I have one more technique I want to show you before you go on missions. Just now. I thought you taught me every jutsu you knew about. Or knew how to teach, at least. You already know the jutsu. But this will help you avoid needing my power. It just occurred to me as I recalled a certain memory. Huh? I already know the jutsu. So what are you going to teach me? Strategy. Now again. You aren't going to train your reaction speed by just standing around, right? Naruto blurred again. Kakashi observed Naruto practice. His strategy was certainly an interesting one. Even without a Sharingan, he could see Naruto's movement. Most ninja just used smaller amounts of chakra or jumped as he described. But Naruto just slowed himself physically. Counterintuitive perhaps, for a technique that increased your speed. But Naruto seemed to have a different idea in mind than most ninja who learned this technique. When he had taught him the technique, that included masking his exit with smoke and leaves. But Naruto had almost immediately discarded that portion entirely. And now he was taking things as slow as possible. Now, he wasn't even trying to go in a straight line. He was attempting right-angle turns and even turning back the way he came mid-dash. The only way those were even possible, even in the half-successes Naruto was demonstrating, was if he was gripping the ground like wall walking. Which required concentration in itself. Naruto was not practicing a quick getaway jutsu. He was trying to increase his speed as a whole. The more he watched, the longer Naruto actually held the jutsu. Which wasn't even part of what he taught. It was supposed to be a quick burst of chakra, gathered and released. Not held for 5 entire seconds. Kakashi was not unfamiliar with the concept of these sorts of battle techniques. His own lightning cutter increased his speed by a ludicrous amount, the only reason that it was viable for assassination with all the light and sound it made. But even with the Sharingan, it was difficult to avoid tunnel vision. Though other ninja had managed to attain that speed without a Sharingan. Well, at the very least, it will be a learning experience for the boy. Okay, Kakashi is off our collective ass, probably teaching that Uchiha brat something. Let's move on. You can train some more later. Naruto smirked. Or he's just confident I won't kill myself if left unsupervised for more than 3 seconds. He had picked up a few traits from his first sensei. Probably a bit of both. Now listen. Henge. What is it used for? Disguise. Making sure you aren't recognized and stuff. It only really works on civilians, though. Not unless you only need it for a few seconds. It works better if you aren't using a disguise that wears orange. Still, you are somewhat right. Unless a ninja also suppresses their chakra, it's a pretty bad disguise. Assuming the enemy ninja is not a censor. And it's almost useless to ask you to suppress your chakra. You are already suppressing mine. Though perhaps you should not be basing your expectations on Anbu forces. Or the Hokage. As long as you act as expected, it is still quite possible to escape notice. So what are you getting at? It's pretty good as a distraction sometimes, but it's not exactly a good jutsu or anything. Uses a lot of chakra too, especially if I'm trying to be an adult. Almost as much as my clones. And there it was. Kurama's confirmation. He had been hoping that his memory hadn't been faulty. It didn't make too much sense that Naruto performed an even less chakra-intensive jutsu than the normal clones with better reliability than half the class. Naruto grinned. Though my sexy jutsu has some pretty great uses. Kurama rolled his eyes inside Naruto's gut. Even with his direct influence, it seemed that Naruto still was just as innocently perverted as ever. Like, even before puberty hit. It was weird. The jutsu did admittedly work on quite a few powerful ninja. Unfortunately, most of the ninja it worked on were allies. At the same time, he was a little disappointed that Naruto hadn't figured out anything wrong with what he said. Especially since Naruto knew that his clones were exhausting for practically any other ninja. Kurama didn't point that out, though. Naruto could marvel at his own stupidity later. So, what if you transform into a rock? Or perhaps a shuriken? Naruto shrugged. I dunno. Never thought about it. A rock might be good camouflage, though. Do it then. Henge. A rock now dropped to the ground with a loud thud. They were also blind. Though the vibrations caused by the ground and wind were certainly an interesting sensation. And from what Kurama could sense of their new body, the rock was about the same weight as Naruto. It was smaller in size, though. Mass-based, not size-based. Interesting. Make the rock smaller. Another poof, and a smaller version of the same rock fell and rolled a little on the grass. This one was actually lighter. Drop it. But the final poof, Naruto was restored, and so was their vision. Sensei, that was kinda weird. It certainly was. Now, was there anything different about the second transformation? It used more chakra. Naruto scratched his head. Sorry, I can never get it to use the same amount of chakra unless I practice the same transformation over and over. You did nothing wrong, Naruto. That is a simple function of the jutsu. That's not the point of this lesson. Now think of this scenario. You are tied up and an enemy is about to score the final blow on you. How do you proceed? Naruto frowned. Oh what? The ropes, Naruto. How do you get out? But I need time for that. Kurama groaned. Do I really have to tell you everything outright? Turn into a rock, idiot. Naruto blinked. Oh. Wow, that's a lot easier. Really, Naruto? Hey, it's not my fault. There were all sorts of classes on getting out of traps and this wasn't even mentioned once. Why wouldn't everybody just do that? Not everyone thinks, Naruto. While it is okay to build off others' knowledge, you need to understand how to step back and think of alternatives when necessary. Others, even respected ninja, can be wrong or have ideas that are not fully optimized. That sounds hard, you know. Trust other people, but find something better as often as you can. Okay, that makes more sense. Why didn't you just say that? In this case, I think it's a matter of you using an entirely different jutsu. Wait, what equals? Remember your jutsu teacher before Iruka? Naruto made a face. Yeah, him. He taught you the wrong seals. He gaped. Why didn't you tell me, then? It was a mental shrug. It was working. Kurama, plus Kit, I knew that if you used the correct seals, you would be overloading it just as badly as the clones. Okay. So what does this have to do with it being a different jutsu? Your henge uses up a lot more chakra and is entirely solid. Solid? It actually changes your shape. It doesn't for other people. No, it does not. Naruto gasped. So you're saying I made up my own jutsu? A grin spread across his face. I don't actually know. Other Jinchuriki like yourself have adapted to their captives. Gained a few powers independent of our actual chakra. That power could be one of mine. You don't know. I have spent very little of my life actually outside a host. Naruto looked down. Oh. Don't worry about it, Kit. Not your fault. Now, I want you to understand something. What else was different about your second transformation? Oh well, I was smaller. And it used more chakra. So the reason it was more difficult is because I was smaller. That is true, but not the lesson I wanted you to take away from this. Do rocks perform hand seals? He gasped. Yeah, you don't need them. Now, for most jutsu, it is possible to negate the need for seals. But I don't think you needed them in the first place. Seriously, why couldn't you have told me this before, you know? Didn't think it was important. Or rather, Naruto didn't actually use the technique that much other than right after he left the academy. And he only used it once in a way sufficiently interesting. I still can't really use it in front of others, can I? Why do you say that? Well, it's an advantage. Something secret. And you told me to always keep stuff like my sealing secret so it was a surprise for enemies. This is just similar enough where most won't question it until it's too late. And Kakashi, well, he knows that I'm inside you. Many adults will look over a little strangeness in your particular case. Naruto suddenly grinned. Hey Kurama. You feel everything I do, right? When I'm paying attention, yes. Why? The poof of smoke erupted around them and they were suddenly much closer to the ground. Naruto brought a paw in front of his face. This better? Then Naruto. Kakashi slipped away as silently as he could. The henge did not work that way. And from the rather worrying one-sided conversation he witnessed, Naruto not only had another teacher, but well, there were very few parties it could reasonably be, and the most likely one was possibly the worst one to have. A Naruto-sized fox was not a good sign, either. Even if it only had one tail. Kakashi. The Hokage looked up. Ah, I see. You have noticed too. Yes, I am aware. It worries me as well. Now, tell me everything you heard. Naruto found himself eating dirt almost immediately. He may have known how Kurama looked, or more applicably, how red foxes looked, since he didn't actually want to alarm too many people if he was seen, but he certainly didn't know how to move like one. He couldn't speak, either. Only make fox noises, which were stranger than he expected. He could yip, but that was about as close to a dog as the sounds got. I wish I could just give control to you for a bit. I know, kid, thank you. Still want to get used to this, though. It is possible, you know. What? The switch places. The seal needs to be much looser, though. Oh, Naruto paused, thinking. But that's for later. Now, we get some dinner. Naruto looked up at the sun's position. But it's so early. Kurama smiled. Do you really think you'll have a successful hunt if you can barely walk? Naruto gave a monkey-like fox laugh. Okay, you got me there. And you'd better be pushing on that seal. I want something to show Jiraiya, you know. Jiraiya followed the fox from a safe distance. Was Minato right? Is it him? He somehow wanted the boy to control the fox's power, but by all accounts, he had done one better. It was worrying. He could easily be manipulated rather than friends with the beast. But at the same time, if the boy could manage to befriend a tailed beast, well then, peace might not be too far-fetched an idea. If Naruto was being tricked, though, there was no way he should loosen the seal. It was curious, though, that Naruto showed none of the overwhelming power that usually came with being a Jinchuriki. Just this odd power of his that took barely any energy at all. The name Naruto gave to the beast Kurama. Was it possible that a force of nature like the Kyuubi had one? Or was this just a boy giving a name to someone he liked? If it was the former, what about Naruto was so special that he was the only one to know it? There was also the fact that Minato had given a purposefully faulty seal on the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. The most powerful tailed beast by a wide margin. Anything less than a perfect seal, well, it wouldn't go well. It wasn't supposed to go well, at least. Giratora explained that the circumstances of the sealing were rushed to begin with. Jiraiya had expected to need to immediately tighten it. He had been preparing to return to Konoha for that very reason before the Hokage had summoned him. He wasn't sure what to think now. He had heard that his godson wanted to learn sealing. But sealing was not something that was emphasized in the academy. If it was still mentioned at all. He was excited and a little proud that someone would want to walk in his footsteps. But that feeling was now thoroughly tempered. It was a lot harder to hunt as a fox. Okay, that wasn't completely true. Once he got over his difficulty with movement and realized that he could still use ninja techniques like tree walking, it was even easier to be stealthy and stalk his prey. But he couldn't exactly throw kunai. Easy meals like birds were right out unless he caught them before they were in the air. It was only when it was starting to get dark and his stomach was protesting that Naruto finally understood what Kurama was doing. He had always complained to Naruto that it was hard to keep him motivated with training. Ichiraku Ramen was a good motivator, but doing that every day was hard. And while Naruto really did want to get stronger, something that abstract was hard to get excited for. You really want me to get good like this, don't you? You sound like Sasuke. Brat. But if you like to stay like this, I want to, you know. It's a good form to evade suspicion, especially if you make yourself a little smaller than this. Okay. It's also good for stealth. Sure. Brat. Naruto couldn't stop a grin from forming. Whatever you say, sensei. The one downside of the henge was that it took chakra to maintain. This was not a particular problem for Naruto, as even though his variation took more chakra to initiate, it took even less chakra to keep up. The strain was negligible. Even better, the subconscious effort to keep it active apparently was small enough not to be disturbed in his sleep. Sleeping on a forest floor was a lot more comfortable when you were covered in multi-layered fur. The issue was that he didn't want to get up. Come on, kid, get up. We have more work to do. Naruto groaned. Really? Can't it wait? Grab some breakfast. I have one more lesson to teach you before your chakra training. Ugh, fine. It only took him a few minutes to find food now that he had permission to hunt as a human and had access to his weapons. Still, it was a good exercise and by the time he finished eating, he was fully awake and a lot less sore. So what are we doing today? People watching. Huh? What are you talking about? You were going to sneak into the village and watch people. Yeah, I got that. Why? If you know how people look, you can create a believable original disguise without the risk of copying someone. If you know how they act, you can avoid suspicion. Unless someone is actively spying, you can avoid detection completely. Naruto frowned. Yeah, but this is a ninja village. Everyone is spying. There was a huff. Less than you'd think. And besides, it's good practice for when you learn more mundane ways to disguise yourself. Okay. I already know how everybody acts, though. Not when they don't know you're there. Make shadow clones. Sneak in as a fox. Turn into a mouse or something. Nobody expects something they don't believe is possible. Naruto rolled his eyes. Fine. But if I get caught, this is totally your fault, you know. Kurama was right. Well, Naruto already had a very good idea of what his classmates were like since they had gotten used to his presence over the years of contact. The villagers were not like this. It was alarming to see just how differently people held themselves, their faces, actions, even the way they walked was different. And there was just so much variety, something that Kurama made sure to point out to him. Nobody looked normal. It was the sure sign of something being wrong. Or the sign of a novice shinobi. Naruto actually noticed a few of those after a few hours of observation. The art of a disguise, Kurama told him, is to be just interesting enough that you avoid suspicion. Someone walked by that caught Naruto's immediate attention. Most people in the village he had some sort of vague memory of. At least the interesting ones. This man, though, was not of the forgettable type. He sported long, ragged white hair and an odd sort of forehead protector that certainly wasn't listed when they were introduced in the academy. It was wider than the standard and irregularly shaped with little horns on the sides and jarringly had the kanji for oil on it. And his personality was certainly interesting. He was loud, grandstanding, and while Naruto was used to perverts, even fairly open ones like Kakashi, this man didn't even have to speak to a girl to make Naruto uncomfortable by proxy. His eyes and grin left nothing to imagination. Even civilians, who Naruto had come to understand as the least observant people in the world, were repulsed, and many even overcame their general respect and fear of shinobi to shout him out of their establishments. And then he looked directly at Naruto. His tiny mouse heartbeat skyrocketed and he slipped around a corner and quickly turned into a rock. What was that? His glance had looked almost casual, but there was something behind those eyes that was so incredibly focused. A moment later, a hand clamped around the rock. Neat trick. Let's talk somewhere else. The voice was quiet and he found himself tucked into a pocket. Only the conspicuous absence of any killing intent stopped Naruto from immediately turning back into a 12-year-old ninja boy. He even sometimes felt that from civilians when they found him out. Or noticed him at all. He felt a little from his classmates whenever he inevitably annoyed them with his pranks. But he felt nothing from him. He was suddenly tossed down on some grass, which he took as an indication that he should no longer be a rock. Naruto wasn't hurt from the fall whatsoever, but felt distinctly embarrassed at his spread-eagled pose. He did catch the look of mild surprise on the man's face, though. Nice work, kid. Not an illusion I'd expect from a genin. Rocks don't have chakra, though. Naruto grumbled. I know. I can't suppress it. More importantly, mice don't act like that. So, why would a ninja of Konoha spy on his own people? He raised an eyebrow. You mean like the Anbu? The man smiled. I like you. But you're no Anbu. So what were you doing? This was not the same man who was leering so openly at anything female that passed by. Naruto pointed at his forehead protector. Are you a Konoha ninja? I haven't seen a headband like that. He grinned wider. You don't know who I am? With a poof of smoke, Jiraiya was suddenly towering above him, standing on a giant toad. I am the sage of the great toads of Mount Myaboku, Jiraiya the toad sage. He struck a pose. It was exaggerated and dorky. Naruto blinked, trying to hide his surprise. Wait, Jiraiya. Something in the goofy pose struck Naruto oddly. He looked directly into Jiraiya's eyes. Pervy sage. His arms dropped from his outlandish pose and his toad disappeared into smoke. Really, kid? How is this guy somehow the biggest idiot in the country and a genius at the same time? I can never tell with you, kid. What? Nothing. Still, the Hokage trusts this guy. So, you know seals and stuff. Jiraiya's entire demeanor relaxed, yet his eyes were much more searching. I might know a few things. What about you? Naruto shifted a little. Just how to make exploding tags and storage scrolls. Nothing that special. That's as far as most bother. I assume you want to take things further. Yeah. So who was your teacher? If you self-taught yourself exploding tags, you shouldn't have all your limbs right about now. Naruto glanced at his stomach nervously. Jiraiya waved it off. Never mind that. Anything else I should know? Well, I did things properly. Learned what things did instead of just copying stuff. Jiraiya nodded. And just how did you do that? As far as I remember, Konoha's library was still rather lacking in the subject. My teacher? Jiraiya wasn't sure what to think, but carefully concealed that fact from the boy in front of him. Hiruzen had told him of the boy's interest in sealing, which was a wonderful excuse for him to come and make sure Naruto was handling the fox properly. But he was starting to understand why the Hokage's message felt so much like he was hiding things from his student. Jiraiya would probably not have believed him. So, what do you want to get out of the sealing arts? Naruto looked up, a faint look of calm on his face. If Jiraiya hadn't been a master at infiltration and people skills, it might have even worked. What do you mean? What made you so interested in the most fiddly shinobi art there is? A person you admired. A skill that was too awesome to miss out on. Come on, everybody has something like that. I'll want to make my own seals. Why? Naruto looked down for a moment. There's someone really important to me. If I can learn to make a certain seal, then. His hand suddenly clenched into a fist. Okay, screw all this. I have to tell you anyway since I can't do anything without the key anyway. Jiraiya frowned slightly. This was exactly what he had been worried about, but he still needed the boy talking, so he said nothing. Kurama, who is Kurama? That's his name. Jiraiya already had heard the boy talking to him. But it was good to maintain appearances, and it was also useful to know exactly how much he was willing to say. So Kurama's stuck in me. He can see and feel what's going on, but he can't do anything. He certainly could, though. That was the worrying part. Have you used his power before? His chakra? Naruto shook his head. Not yet. He was gonna train me later to use it without getting angry like him, but we didn't do that yet. The backup plan. No, that didn't make much sense, either. But anyway, I really didn't like that he didn't get to do, like anything. At first, I just wanted to seal off. But people wouldn't really trust him. And I'm not strong enough where people would think I can handle him. Does he know more of Minato's plan? So I thought, maybe I could make a seal that only lets us push chakra to each other, without either of us being able to take any. So it would have to be like, a gift or something. Interesting. And then I thought if there was a way to make his chakra go outside my body, he could have a body of his own without, killing me, you know. Jiraiya tensed, and this time Naruto noticed. Hey, that stuff would still be controlled by the other seal, and it would have to go through my body. So if it really got dangerous I could shut it down. So it makes people less nervous. It didn't matter how controlled it was. The Kyuubi was the Kyuubi. Not many people would just accept that Naruto wanted it to roam free. It was hard enough for them to accept Naruto himself as the container. There was also an additional problem. Sorry, kid, but a seal like that is impossible. Naruto froze, then looked at his feet. Oh. He looked back up. Why? Each of those concepts are possible, with a little work and ingenuity. Combined, they represent what would easily be an entire life's worth of work. Maybe several. The complexity of a seal gets more and more unmanageable the more you ask it to do. Not to mention that it has to contain one of the most singularly powerful forces in the world. Slowly, a smile came back to Naruto's face. So, the first part is still fine. The gift seal. Jiraiya gave him an uncomfortable smile. I suppose. The smile's intensity increased. You're a seal master, right? So you can help me with it? The sage immediately frowned. I'm not going to spend over 3 months of constant work just to add more anxiety to my life. He softened slightly at Naruto's look. Look, kid, I get that you trust the fox. Even I can see that the beast isn't acting as murderous as he usually does. But this isn't something I can just hope for the best with. Naruto sighed. Okay, listen. I'll teach you all you want to know about sealing, as long as you promise me 2 things. 1, that you don't activate an untested seal without me looking over it. Well, duh. Jiraiya rolled his eyes and restrained himself from retorting. 2, even if you complete a satisfactory replacement, I must have good reason to believe that the Kyuubi won't immediately escape while we actually perform the replacement. Naruto frowned again. That didn't seem likely, at least in the short time frame he was aiming for. Trust wasn't easily gained even with normal ninja, let alone a formerly murderous force of nature. So, what if we put another seal around the place that makes it impossible to gather chakra? Wouldn't that work? You know about chakra suppression seals? Naruto shrugged. Kurama just said seals could do pretty much anything. So that's a real thing they can do? Jiraiya took a deep breath. You, kid, are absolutely infuriating and also exactly the type of mind that will go far in sealing. Unfortunately, such a seal applies to everyone equally within the area. And it is impossible to apply seals without chakra. And you, gather the chakra outside the seal, then go inside the seal and release it. Jiraiya really didn't care for this particular conversation. It was making him look a lot less competent than he actually was. Yes, I suppose that would be possible if the suppression seal was modified from the normal combat variety. Naruto's grin returned with a vengeance, and his body relaxed in a way that almost made Jiraiya insulted, as if he wasn't dangerous enough to be a threat. You weren't supposed to trust someone that fast. He was an S-class ninja, damn it. Alright, kid, you got me. But you have to do all the work for it. Naruto beamed. Alright. So what are you gonna teach me first? Just because Jiraiya had been completely and thoroughly outmaneuvered didn't mean he was going to give up. Naruto was going to be an awesome apprentice. And he did say that when the Kyuubi was going to train him in using his chakra, he was allowed to watch. Naruto still kept calling him pervy sage, though. Now, before we get straight into sealing, there is one ninjutsu that I want to teach you that has many connections to the sealing arts. Not only is it very useful on its own, but if you take some of its principles to heart, you may eventually be able to apply simple enough seals with a touch of chakra. Naruto's attention was now thoroughly focused. If he was going to be a speedy fighter like his father was, alright. So what is it? It's called the summoning technique. Let me demonstrate. Watch closely. He bit his thumb, then smeared the blood against his left palm, before making a few hand signs and pressing his blood-smeared palm against the ground. Seal script spread out from the hand, written in that blood. Kuchiyus no Jutsu. Naruto jumped back from the smoke. Hey, that's the frog from earlier. The frog in question extended its tongue, depositing a scroll into Naruto's arms. The summoning technique is a jutsu that is almost perfect for you, Naruto. It is rare among ninja due to the large chakra cost needed for the summon to be useful in direct combat, but your chakra levels are more than capable of handling it without crippling your own combat ability. Something rustled in the woods, but Naruto ignored it, fully focused on his new teacher. Jiraiya gestured towards the scroll in Naruto's arms. That is the contract scroll of the toads. Simply sign your name and blood, then make a fingerprint impression with all the fingers of your hand. Naruto opened the scroll, eyes skimming over all the past names as he found an empty space. He bit his thumb and reached out. Grrrr. Naruto paused. That sounded an awful lot like an irritated Kurama, but Jiraiya was looking off to the side. Naruto followed his gaze. Oh, it's just him. There was a red fox at the edge of the clearing. Naruto recognized him, though, since he was the first fox that he had come across in the woods. And became his template for correcting the mistakes he made when transforming into a fox in general. They both left each other alone, but he sometimes saw the fox watch him hunt. Well, his hand was going to heal soon, so he brought his thumb back to the scroll. DRRR. Jiraiya snickered. Naruto, do you know this guy? Naruto looked back up at his teacher. He would probably have to bite his thumb again, and the blood was drying already. I guess. He shrugged. He turned his thoughts inward. Kurama, is there something wrong with the Toad contract? No. I never much liked the bastards, but they are decent, I guess. Naruto put his hand down. Oh. He looked back at Jiraiya, who was looking at him with interest. So, is the contract thing really important? What happens if I do the jutsu without it? There was a slight frown, and he sighed. It was rather disappointing that he had yet again lost someone to pass down the contract to. It's dangerous, kid. So what does it do? He rolled his eyes. Theoretically, it isn't dangerous at all. Either it fails, or it succeeds and transports you to the realm of the summons that you are most compatible with. But summons, well, not all of them are friendly, and in almost all cases, there will be creatures that are much more powerful and much more experienced than you. They will likely test you, and depending on the summon, you could easily die. He looked back down at the scroll. Oh, hey kid. Why don't we train with my chakra? Make sure the old pervert has some reassurance. Naruto grinned. Hey pervy sage. I have an idea. Jiraiya knew what Kyuubi chakra felt like. It was thick, oppressive, and with so much concentrated hate that almost anyone would classify it as pure evil. This was not what Naruto's new chakra felt like. Not at all. Naruto's physical changes were about what he expected. He had seen similar on Kushina. His eyes were slitted, his teeth were just a little more sharp, his whisker markings were more pronounced, and his posture got just a little more feral. But the chakra was strange. It did not surround him like a cloak. It was not a dark red. It looked almost like Naruto's own yellow chakra, except just a little more orange. And rather than the heavy oily cloak, it danced around him, barely even showing itself. It was bright. It flashed like fire. And apart from a slight narrowing of the eyes, it didn't seem to be affecting Naruto's mental state much at all. If Jiraiya couldn't feel just how much power was radiating from the boy, he would have thought that the fox wasn't giving him much at all. Ruse or not, it was a big indication that for now, the fox was actually playing nice. And then Naruto took out a kunai and slashed his hand open. Jiraiya was on him in an instant, grabbing both of his wrists and pinning him against the ground, knocking the weapon out of his hand. Sensei. Naruto. What were you doing? Recognition flashed across his face. Oh. Yeah, sorry about that. I wanted to see if I healed any faster now that I had more of Kurama's chakra. His eyes darted towards the hand in question. And it worked, see? He gave a little wave. Jiraiya released him and stared. The hand was still covered in blood, but the actual wound, deep as it had been, was completely missing. Naruto wiped his hand on the dirt. So can I try the jutsu? Not unless you can prove to me you can fight like that. Come at me, and I'll see if you're ready. Truthfully, Jiraiya doubted it. True, his healing factor was quite impressive and was the one thing that didn't make him just dismiss the concept outright, but even without the Kyuubi, Naruto already had more chakra than he knew how to deal with. But that healing ability told him that the chakra that swirled around the kid in front of him might have additional effects. It took only a few exchanges for Naruto to understand that Jiraiya was not just a capable spy, but a capable fighter too. It took only a few exchanges after that for Jiraiya to understand that everything about the kid was somehow enhanced by the chakra that flickered around his body. His strength, speed, endurance, everything was a grade above what it should have been. His technique was still a little sloppy, a mix between academy basic kata and some improvisation that made him actually pose any sort of danger, and he didn't seem to know any combat jutsu whatsoever. Which was to be expected, but it was a thought that was relevant because in everything else, he was easily chunin level after the boost. And then he sped up. Jiraiya almost got hit in his surprise. He was still able to keep up, of course. But this was Naruto suddenly stopped, a huge grin on his face. It worked. It was the shunshin. The long, slower version Naruto had been practicing. But it was about 4 times as fast as before. It also scaled to his new speed. How did you do that? It was a good question. Naruto did not have the Sharingan. He did not have the years of experience that his father had. I noticed my eyes were, like, really good. And I was noticing things faster when you were attacking back. So I tried my new jutsu, since I can heal really fast if something went wrong. And it worked. He jogged rapidly in place, yellowish-orange chakra flashing at his feet. Jiraiya let out a long breath. He had been fully prepared to deny Naruto his wish until he was more prepared. He had a speech ready and everything. But the summoning jutsu was useful and really something that would form the base of a lot of battle-ready seals. It was an important part of his training and something, unlike SEAL theory, that really needed a teacher rather than just assigning bookwork to the kid. But like this Naruto could fight a ninja far above his current skill quite successfully, even without any battle jutsu. Even if he couldn't handle the summons that he encountered, he would be able to run away. He would be more safe than he could have hoped. Safer than it was when he did the technique himself, certainly. Alright. I'll teach you. But be careful, you hear me? Naruto's grin threatened to split his face. Yes, sensei. Jiraiya smiled. He hadn't even bothered to call him a pervert. Alright. You saw what I did with my blood, right? Do the same, and after you gather your chakra, make the boar, dog, bird, monkey, and ram signs to mold it in the correct manner. Later, with practice, you'll learn how to mold it more precisely than that, and it will be a great lesson in sealing, but for now, your blood should do the rest. Naruto went to bite his thumb, but Jiraiya held up a hand. Wait. Just in case he reached into a pouch and retrieved a rolled up map. Take this. Just in case. Naruto tucked it in one of the straps he used for scrolls, but gave his teacher a questioning looks. Go ahead. Jiraiya didn't tell him, but it was more assurance than anything. If his summons did not accept him, then he would at least be able to find the way home. He didn't exactly want to tell Naruto that he was that prepared for him to fail, though. Naruto slammed his palm onto the ground. Kuchiyus no jutsu. And with that, he disappeared into a puff of smoke. Jiraiya sighed, fervently hoping that he did not just make a huge mistake. It was an interesting sensation to be pulled through space. But Naruto did not have much time to dwell on things. He was sitting on a stone slab with some worn but interesting spiral designs. He was also in the middle of the woods. Woods that he recognized. He was still in Konoha. He looked around again. Okay, maybe not actually in the village. But there's no way this isn't nearby. But there definitely weren't any summoning creatures around. There was a sudden puff of smoke to the left of him and he immediately fell off the stone in surprise. Ow, ow. Naruto stood up, brushing off dirt and leaves. But he froze as soon as he saw what was on the stone. It was a fox. The same exact red fox as before. Hello. It stared at him for about 3 seconds, then simply jumped off the stone and disappeared into the woods. He made to follow. His foot immediately was caught in rope as he was hauled unceremoniously up into the air. Naruto groaned. This was quite possibly the most simple and easy to find trap and he got caught in it. He reached up with a kunai and cut the rope near the knot. He landed on his feet. A pair of eyes shone out of the forest. The fox was still waiting for him. He started again, this time paying much more attention. Simple traps littered the path in front of him, always just out of sight. Hervey Sage mentioned some sort of test. I guess this is part of it. As the prank master of Konoha, though, they were quite easy to avoid. And as he followed the fox in front of him, he always seemed to stay just close enough where Naruto could find him again. The traps got harder, though. Trickier to find, redundant triggers, there was even some that he had to disable to progress, instead of simply avoiding. It was only when he just barely managed to duck a shuriken trap that he realized that this might be a bit more dangerous than he was expecting. The fact that he hadn't even noticed the pressure trigger beneath the leaves was also a shock. Then they got ridiculous. It became more of a test of reflexes than actual trap finding ability. At some point, Kurama started to give him chakra. And then he hit a wall. Metaphorically, that is. He knew how to climb regular walls. The real problem started when the traps got just a little bit too fast for him. He had to pick various weapons out of his body regularly and without Kurama helping him heal, he would probably have bled out a long time ago. The field in front of him, though some of the traps weren't even hidden and he knew that disabling them would be just as dangerous as running headlong in. Even with his shunshin, he was unsure he would actually be fast enough to survive. Think, Kit. That broke him out of his stupor. His oldest sensei hadn't said a single word since he arrived in this place. Stop thinking like a samurai and think like a ninja. Otherwise you'd might as well go home. Naruto rolled his eyes. He had heard those words more than anything else. It was one of the first lessons that Kurama tried to hammer into his head. He was a man of action and deeds. He was also a man of pranks and being a sneaky bastard when the mood struck him. Getting him to treat fights like pranks was an ongoing project of Kurama's. More importantly, it was the concept that cheating was everything. It was at this point that Naruto noticed that only the clearing was actually trapped. There was nothing actually keeping him walled in the test. So he walked around it. He walked all the way up to the fox that was waiting for him. It gave him a short bark and vanished into the trees completely. Naruto's stomach fell through the floor. I just blew it, didn't I? He sat down on the cold grass and dirt. He didn't quite know Jiraiya enough to really feel guilty about disappointing him. He was one of the few adults that seemed to recognize him, but that seemed almost unimportant compared to how he felt about Kurama. The thought had grown for past half hour of testing. At this point, he was pretty sure. Unless the summons that he was doing this test for only employed foxes, which would be weird, the summons were foxes. Naruto loved his stomach's irritated inhabitant. He had been given stories of his real father. His mother, too. And while he loved the Hokage like a grandpa, well, Kurama was the only one who was always there. Always had time for him, even if he tended to complain about it. A lot. Kurama was the reason he wanted to continue practicing being a fox, even though it was a lot easier to be a person. And he would have had fox summons. Naruto. But he messed that up, just like he messed everything up when it was important. Naruto. The voice was a roar in his head. Naruto jerked his head up. The fox was back. He was sitting pantly, looking Naruto directly in the eyes. In front of him was a scroll. What? Hands shaking, he opened the seal and unrolled it unsteadily. Empty columns of ink spread across his vision. Only 2 of them were filled, the ink smudged and fading. But the look was unmistakable. This was a contract scroll. He looked up uncertainly. The fox nodded. Go ahead, Kit. Naruto bit his thumb and tried very hard to keep his heart out of his throat as he carefully wrote his name. Finally, he spread his blood to his other fingers and made the imprint. He looked up again. The fox sneezed. He glanced back down at the scroll. Right. Double-checking to make sure the ink was dry, he rolled it up again and tried to give it back to the fox. He pushed it back towards Naruto. Naruto stared. You want me to have this? The fox nodded and pushed it again. The scroll was large and almost tall enough to reach his shoulders, but it had a strap. He put it on, feeling completely out of his depth. The fox immediately started walking back the way he came. He walked through the field, somehow disabling all the traps he passed with just teeth and paws. Naruto followed with significant caution until he was back at the stone. He climbed uncertainly back on top of it, and before he could look back to the fox to see if he was supposed to do something else, he felt himself being wrenched through space. Oh, thank God. Jiraiya rushed over to check him for injuries, pausing once he noticed the scroll across his back. So, what sort of summons do you have? Foxes? Jiraiya surreptitiously rolled his eyes. Of course it would be. So they gave you the contract scroll. Naruto shrugged. I guess. Is that something special? You have the one for toads. Actually, it was something special, but he wasn't going to tell Naruto that. Gama was actually the holder of the toad scroll. He just could summon him whenever. It likely also meant that Naruto was the only fox summoner at this point and they trusted him to find others that might be worthy. Either that or they knew where the Kyuubi was and that the scroll would be safest with Naruto. It was difficult to tell. Did the Kyuubi even count as a fox? Let's just say that you need to keep that safe, no matter what. It was possible to create another contract scroll, but costly. For the summons, that is. It was impossible to replace for a human. Naruto looked slightly intimidated by his expression. I should probably go put this back in my apartment then. He made to leave. It'll be safe with me here. Just don't take it on missions. And don't display it openly unless you are prepared to teach a student of your own, right? Naruto kept his face fairly neutral, but there was a glint in his eyes that both scared and excited him equally. So are you ready to try summoning for real? Naruto smiled and bit his thumb. This time he went through the signs much faster and placed his palm on the ground with confidence. There was a poof of smoke and the exact same fox stepped out. Naruto made a face. You again? The fox gave him a look. Naruto seemed to understand exactly what he was trying to say. Not that you aren't great or anything. I just was hoping to see what other foxes were like. Honest. Jiraiya was not surprised in the least to find that it was the same fox that interrupted the toad contract earlier. It was a meddling bastard, but it looked pretty much exactly like most entry-level summons. The fact that it would likely grow with Naruto was only a plus. So what's his name? Naruto stopped his one-sided argument with the summons. What is your name? Naruto snorted. That's what I thought. He doesn't speak, sensei, and I'm not calling him He's really good with traps, though. He speaks fox just fine. Naruto ignored him. Jiraiya nodded thoughtfully. It was a very Naruto summon. And most low-level summons weren't really useful to begin with, so it was quite the find. Good job, Naruto. I'll leave whatever test you went through alone. He looked up at the sun, which was close to the horizon. We don't have the time to start on our real sealing lessons, but there's one last thing I want you to try with the summoning jutsu. Sure, what? Focus all your chakra into it. The golden chakra too. Everything you can. Everything. That was one of the few things that was emphasized in the academy as a terrible idea. If your chakra was completely depleted, well, you would die. But with Kurama, that was pretty much impossible. Why? Won't that overload the jutsu? Jiraiya chuckled. The summoning jutsu is the only jutsu that is impossible to overload. Chakra and blood are the payment for the summoned creature. Go ahead, Kit. If you get into a fight you can't get out of, I want to know who I'm going to be fighting with. Alright, if you're sure. Besides, I'm here to help just in case they aren't friendly. Naruto sat down this time, gathering chakra before biting his thumb. It was a long time, too, since Kurama constantly fed him more and more. Just as it got to the point where he actually couldn't hold any more, he bit his thumb, made the signs to mold the chakra already gathered, and slammed his palm onto the ground. Naruto disappeared in a puff of smoke, and reappeared 2 feet in front of himself. Jiraiya gaped. Bullshit. Shit. Well, that's a headache and a half. Naruto rubbed his own head. Kurama. What just happened? You just summoned me and brought yourself along for the ride. It's goddamn confusing to give yourself chakra, by the way. Naruto paused, the implication sinking in. He didn't even bother to keep his thoughts to himself. Wait, you're a summon. Course I am, Kit. The sage was powerful and he could create life, but he can't create souls. He picked a few of his friends to keep that bastard's chakra safe. Huh. Worst mistake of my life, I can tell you that. Immortality isn't worth this mess. I don't know what to say to that. Wish that could have actually summoned you, though. Would save us a whole lot of trouble. Jiraiya looked alarmed in the background. And then you would die from the shock. Neither of us wants that, Kit. Right, yeah. Are there any other fox summons that are really big and stuff? Kurama gave a mental shrug. Wouldn't know. Probably. Lots of the high-level kitsune are pretty long-lived, but I haven't been back there and I don't even know. A long time. Not everybody gets powerful enough to live that long, anyway. But you're the best fox. You have to know at least one other fox that was as good as you were. Kit, I barely had 2 tails. I didn't earn my power, other than being friends with the right person. Or maybe the wrong one. I don't even know anymore. He sounded distinctly tired. A detail stuck out to Naruto. He had heard of the Sage of 6 Paths and decided that that was who Kurama was talking about. But so where did you get your chakra from? There was a flicker of annoyance. Not now, Kit. I'll tell you later. When you're older, maybe. I don't want you worrying about it. Not when you don't need to, anyhow. Naruto frowned. Was it because of Jiraiya sensei? And why would he worry about it when it was that long ago? Whatever. It's getting dark. He stood up and Jiraiya gave him a slightly forced smile as he waved him off home. Jiraiya was worried about Naruto. No, he wasn't worried about the fox. Not as much as usual, at least. Naruto's casual attitude about the potential of freeing it completely was concerning, but after several weeks of daily interaction with its chakra and the effect it had on Naruto had slowly settled much of that fear. Naruto was a little more aggressive than normal, but Naruto had told him outright that Kurama was still a bit of an angry person in general, even though he still insisted that he was a good one. And he was almost inclined to believe him after the remarkable control that the genin should not have at this point. If the fox was trying to control him through the chakra, he would have noticed already. The worry was not one he expected to have for a student. Not unless they were as cold and emotionless as Orochimaru, or maybe as driven by anger and revenge. But if Naruto was either of those, Jiraiya wouldn't have accepted him as a student anyway. It was that he was too eager for training. When it came to sealing, he was studious in a way that his reports showed he certainly wasn't in school. And when he was training with Kurama's chakra, he never once took a break unless it was enforced directly by Kurama, cutting off the flow of chakra. That was certainly an interesting sight to see. Now, both sealing and Kurama were passions for him, and he hoped that the reasons they were passions did not exclusively overlap, but Naruto didn't just push himself there. Originally, Jiraiya followed the boy to make sure he kept his promise not to practice the seals he hadn't gained mastery over and blow himself up. But as the days passed, he realized that what he saw wasn't a fluke. Naruto just didn't let up training at all. The boy wasn't completely without joy or fun, of course. The owners of Ichiraku Ramen were very nice to him and he often stopped there for lunch after training with him. Or before training, when it was Kakashi that trained him with his team. And the times he went hunting were interesting. It was his reactions to the villagers that tipped him off that something was odd. Of course, Jiraiya was mad enough watching how Naruto was treated. But it wasn't like he could attack civilians. And getting publicly attached to the boy could only attract attention that might get a little too close to the truth of the matter. Attach the right sorts of names to the right people and Naruto would get a bounty on his head in no time. But he had read all about Naruto from the file Hiruzen sensei gave him. He was quite the prankster when he was younger. Now, though, whenever he got that sort of glint in his eye, instead of immediate but relatively harmless retaliation, he darted into some sort of nearby training field and got it out of his system in more conventionally productive ways. Also a lot more destructive ways, considering. There were some prank-like executions in how he trained, but they were certainly not fit for a light-hearted jab, even if a shinobi was the target. He didn't play with other kids, or even socialize with other genin from his class, either. While he knew a lot of them did avoid Naruto due to their parents, he thought that a few at least tolerated the boy. At the same time, some of the uses he was finding for relatively simple jutsu were quite creative. And then Naruto got serious about training and decided to just make 50 clones, spamming shunin until he stopped hitting trees. The real one did that toned down version that just made him really fast and tried to pop his clones in passing. It really was a huge difference without the fox's chakra. Naruto was at least 8 times slower and barely reacted in time to hit any of his clones with kunai. Not to mention the clones themselves would periodically blur in and out of existence. More of them died by hitting trees than from kunai. Yet when he had that chakra, he could prove an adequate sparring partner for Jiraiya himself. Well, without using any ninjutsu. Or sealing. It still was impressive for a genin, though. But Naruto seemed to understand how much his clones would help him with training. It made Jiraiya almost envious of his chakra reserves. He was less envious of the mental backlash Naruto seemed to get after every batch of this sort of training, but at least Naruto had enough forethought to only do this type of training at the end of the day, so he could sleep it off. Or maybe it was just Kurama that had the sense. He noticed many instances that he seemed to pause, then return to training with a completely different angle. And Naruto did call him sensei. And when he was too tired from his own training, he would immediately start on seal work. Jiraiya almost stopped him the first time he brought out a scroll and ink, but it seemed that he just took the time to review the notes from his lessons and practice his calligraphy. He was also almost tempted after these weeks to make sure he went lighter on himself, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Naruto was the spitting image of his father, after all. And it wasn't the fact that his father was almost as studious. Minato was at least reasonably socially active in addition to his training. It was the fact that it wasn't exactly going to be long before some ninja that had seen his father in action would notice that his son looked pretty much exactly like him. It was bad enough that he was training the boy and people might make the association just from that. Jiraiya sighed. Naruto needed to be ready for that. Which meant he needed good jutsu. Jutsu like the Rasengan and maybe even the Flying Raijin if he could figure out how his student had managed it. He needed to be ready for the people that wanted to kill him. And if he could trust what Naruto was saying about the fox, relying on his massive chakra wasn't going to cut it. Kurama smiled in his slightly damp cell. Naruto only gained the ability when they were working as one, but he could always feel the intentions of those around him. And if what he felt about the Toad Sage's mental state was correct, he might actually get off his ass and get somewhere with Naruto in a reasonable amount of time. This time around, they might actually be ready. This time around, maybe nobody had to die. Well, other than his enemies, of course. They could go to hell. Kakashi, I think it's time for a real mission. Naruto looked at Sakura with surprise. It wasn't as if she was wrong, of course. Sasuke's chakra-heavy jutsu no longer tired him out nearly as much, all of them had enough chakra control to fight on a river, and Sakura herself was getting remarkably accurate with her poison senbon, even if she didn't quite have her healing jutsu in a state where anyone would be comfortable with it being used on them. It was more that Sasuke was the one that said that practically every training session. Kakashi looked at Naruto. Yeah, I'm kin to getting bored of just training. He gave a little smile. Of course, I would be happy to give you another D. No. He chuckled at the sight of all 3 of his students with the exact same mixture of horror and anger on their faces. I suppose I could convince the Hokage that you 3 are ready. Naruto punched the air. Yes. Though that all depends if there is a C rank available. If there isn't, we will be doing a mission regardless of how exciting it is. Naruto groaned. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Sakura nodded. I suppose that's fair. There will be many missions that you will not enjoy. And there may not always be some other team that is available to take it in your stead. So as of now, we will continue to take missions. Naruto gave Kakashi another pained noise. So it's back to D ranks again. Now. We aren't going to take a mission every day. Something like once or twice a week will be more than enough. We have to give other genin a chance for some easy income, after all. Naruto glared. And training. Kakashi chuckled. And training, I suppose. The trip to the mission assignment desk was short and it took even less time to convince the Hokage that they were ready for a more difficult mission. And all 3 of them were well aware that while C rank missions were certainly more of a real mission than D ranks, they weren't exactly the romanticized missions that were passed around in gossip among the village. Anything was better than menial chores, even when they were presented in a mission format. The actual client, though, damn it. Why do we have to get the drunk? Naruto hated drunks. It wasn't necessarily the fact that they smelled overpoweringly like alcohol. It was the fact that they smelled overpoweringly like cheap alcohol. The good stuff was annoying, but at least it wasn't this. And it seemed that this Tazuna had a similar opinion about the 3 of them being kids. He also seemed to have a rather inflated opinion of himself just for being a guy that built bridges. All in all, he was a very punchable man. But he was the client and they were supposed to protect him. Not punch him. No matter how annoying. Even if he deserved it. At this point, Naruto was almost hoping they got attacked by bandits just to shut this stupid civilian up. At least the civilians in the village respected shinobi, even if they were kids. Well, not Naruto, but that was more because they were afraid of him. And even though it sucked balls, at least he understood why. This was the first time that Naruto left the country, though. So that was exciting. They were only about a half-mile out, at an excruciatingly slow civilian pace, when he was struck with the feeling that something was wrong. Something smells off about that water. It hasn't rained. Naruto stiffened and glanced at his other teammates. Either they hadn't noticed or they were better at hiding their nonchalance. He glanced at Kakashi and they made eye contact briefly. "You three stay with the client. I'm going to scout up ahead." "What? Why would he? He has a plan, idiot. Or he's testing you." Naruto tried to catch his teammates' eyes again, but it didn't work. "Grr. Why do they have to be this clueless? That's rich, coming from you. I highly doubt that many jounin sensei would teach fresh genin to be this paranoid. In peacetime, that is. You got me. Lucky you." Naruto rolled his eyes at the sarcasm. "I like having you around, Kurama, even though I don't like you being trapped. So what do we do? Think it out. Right now, you have surprise on these ninja. The enemy ninja have surprise on your two teammates. Which is better?" "Oh." Naruto straightened up and tapped his teammates on their shoulders. "Enemy behind," he whispered. It almost certainly gave away to the ninja behind them that they no longer had the element of surprise, but it was better than them actually having it. It wasn't like Naruto was their only target. And since Kurama made it very clear that he wasn't going to interfere unless Naruto was actually in danger of dying, he wasn't quite confident in his own abilities to say that he was worth two of his teammates. That was a stupid line of thinking, even if he was better. And besides, he worked best when he had time to set traps beforehand. Direct combat, well, he could barely match Sasuke when they sparred. Given how much time Naruto spent training, it wasn't that great of a showing. He had been using the time to charge a few more explosive tags, though. And attach them to his kunai under the pretense of hiding the act of scratching an itch. His little sessions with Jiraiya were already paying off. So when he heard the slight sound of water dripping off a pair of shinobi, two explosives were already in flight. As were a buttload of shuriken. And some poison needles. The three of them stared at the two very dead ninja. Naruto scratched the back of his head. "Oh whoops. I guess that was kinda overkill, wasn't it?" "No, Naruto. You only limit your arsenal when your supply itself is limited. Or if stealth is required." Kakashi was back. The bridge builder didn't even glance at him. He seemed rather transfixed at the two bodies that were quite suddenly not very intact. Or if the targets have important information. Naruto walked over to the bodies. He grimaced. Hunting was something he had done for years and he was used to blood. He had even hunted with explosives one day, to very poor results. And with Kakashi's substitution jutsu, he had even seen an approximation of human death. It was not pleasant to see it for real. Not at all. That didn't stop him from recovering his kunai, though. They were the expensive good type that weren't damaged by the level of explosion he had been using. And they were expensive. He looked at the forehead protectors and frowned. "Hey, sensei." Kakashi appeared beside him. These look like Kirinin, but we aren't at war. What's going on?" "It is possible, but unlikely, that they were hired on a mission directly opposed to ours. It is more likely that they are missing ninja that have abandoned their village for mercenary work." Naruto made a face and continued to collect his teammates' weapons from the bodies as well. "Unfortunately, due to the quick response from you three, we don't know their actual target. Were they targeting us as Konoha ninja?" Or he glanced meaningfully at Izuna. "Were they targeting our client?" Izuna started to sweat profusely. Naruto stood up, distributing his teammates' weapons back to them. Sakura made a face at the blood. Sasuke just nodded in recognition. "Sorry about that, sensei." Kakashi waved them off. "You didn't know the plan. And you certainly don't have the experience required to think of such a plan." He stared meaningfully at the bridge builder. "We do, however, have another source of information." Izuna gulped. "It is one thing to be unaware of the difficulty of a mission. But something tells me there is more to it than that. You do know how serious it is to lie to a ninja village, do you not?" The belligerent drunk was almost unrecognizable from what he was before. Alright. I do have something that I should tell you. This is clearly beyond the scope of the original mission's classification. Not to mention the difference in pay. If we were to turn back now and leave you here, nobody back in Konoha would question our decision. But Kakashi looked over the rest of his team and the three rather unimpressed looks on their faces. "Though I suppose if there are no objections, we could also be convinced to continue. If, that is, we are compensated for an appropriate B-rank mission." Izuna quailed. "But I already told you. You may find that unlike some other ninja villages, Konoha is quite reasonable with those who cannot pay immediately. I'm sure you will do fine if this bridge of yours is as successful as you say." Alright. Thank you, ninja-san. But if I find that you are keeping more from us, I will be less than enthused." I understand." The boat ride over to the land of waves was uncomfortably silent, but Naruto knew better than to complain. The ninja they fought earlier may have been a little too easy, and his first instinct was to completely dismiss any possibility of future attackers being any better, but Kakashi had reminded them that not only was Gato rich enough to hire much better ninja, Kiri nin in particular were perfectly at home on the water. Just like Konoha nin were in the trees. That puddle disguise would be a lot more effective in a land of frequent rain. So he kept his mouth shut, and he got the first glimpse of exactly what he was protecting. It didn't excuse Tezuna's lying or drunkenness, but Naruto could kinda understand his arrogance. The bridge, even only a quarter complete, was damn impressive. A lot more impressive than what was implied on the mission brief. Naruto might have been impressed by the bridge and definitely agreed that it needed to be completed, but he still didn't like the man very much. Fortunately, they made it all the way to the docks without any incident. Tezuna still looked worried, though. I still have to make it home in one piece. They have to realize that those two haven't made it back yet. And if they didn't manage to complete their mission, Kakashi grimaced. Yes, it is worrisome. However, keep in mind that I am a jounin. Our mission may be the absolute worst. The bridge builder cringed. But we will complete it successfully. His eyes passed over his genin team. Not only were Sakura and Sasuke trained far more than practically any peacetime genin, but there weren't many ninja trained by Sannin. If they weren't that good, he would have turned around immediately after hearing the name Gato. No matter what the protests were or how noble the mission was. It could have been reassigned. Gato may be civilian and idiotic in the ways of ninja, but he was a genius when it came to the civilian world and dangerous in that world. Also dangerous in the depth of his pockets. And that bridge did indeed look as important as Tezuna described it to be. But as they walked through the wilderness just outside the coastal town, Naruto turned his attention inward instead. You've been quiet lately. You've been busy lately. And pay attention. I know, but alright. I have an idea, though. Later, brat. Naruto shivered and there was a rustle in the bushes. Oh. In one single fluid and panicked motion, a kunai left his fingers. The entire team was instantly at attention. The sound of a knife against flesh was unmistakable. But Sasuke looked up. It's just a rabbit. Sakura was there a second later. Ugh. That's disgusting. Naruto's face lit up. Lunch. His two teammates stared at him like he was insane. But when he picked up the actual rabbit and to his teammates' horror, finished it off without even pausing, he frowned. Naruto glanced questioningly at Kakashi. They both tensed. Sakura. Sasuke. Be ready. Naruto didn't even bother sealing the dead rabbit away, tossing it aside into the grass without even glancing at it. He was far too busy scanning the road, the trees, the river. Get down. Kakashi saw it first, and the three of them pulled Tezuna down with him, while Kakashi simply dodged as a gigantic sword flew past at neck level. Well. Look what we have here. You must be even more desperate for money than I am if these little brats were all you could get. What? The man was now standing calmly on top of the sword, which was now stuck firmly in a tree. I didn't even see him move. Naruto's stomach turned. Kakashi can take this guy, right? Naruto hated this. He knew that he wouldn't be useful in this fight. Despite his years of training, he was nothing close to the level of power either his jounin sensei or that missing nin was putting out. Sure, he had seen a bit of Jiraiya's taijutsu before. He had sparred with him often with Kurama's power. But he had never seen him use ninjutsu other than that summoning technique, and now he had a sort of idea why. But this wasn't about beating Zabuza one-on-one. Kakashi looked like he was having trouble. And well, you're not in mortal danger, kid. And you aren't going to put yourself in mortal danger either, just so you can steal some power. But that's not fair. Kakashi is not my problem. Naruto gaped. Look. I don't care about pretty much anyone except you. And I happen to have a bit of a dim view of most of the bastards in your village. In Kakashi's case, it was mainly that he had decided that simply watching Naruto as he grew up and making sure that the constant abuse didn't kill him was a perfectly acceptable way of honoring his father's memory. But he wasn't going to say that out loud. He had decided early on that turning Naruto against practically everyone he still liked was a bad idea and was unlikely to keep him alive anyway. But I can't just do nothing. Kakashi was suddenly caught in a water prison. Kurama paused. Alright, kid, I'll give you a hint. Just a small one. You can help. Just use your brains. Not brute strength. If you really want to know, this is exactly why I refuse to give you my power. You get really lazy with it. Even when fighting Jiraiya. Remember your training. Panic started to rise as Kakashi began to visibly run out of oxygen and the copy of Zabuza advanced. Have you learned nothing? Plant explosive tags on your clones. Transform into shuriken. Seriously, all you have to do is get past a single clone. Think. Naruto's eyes shot open. Oh. He briefly chastised himself for forgetting nearly half his lessons, then turned to his teammates. Sasuke. Listen up. There's something I need to tell you. I have a plan. Only the thought that the client might still be in danger kept Naruto walking. Of course, he had a vague idea of how powerful Kakashi was when he set the bell test for them. But that concept just flew right out the window and disintegrated in front of him. He had just seen the real power of an elite ninja. After Kakashi started using the Sharingan, it was astounding. Even Zabuza started to take things seriously. He wasn't quite sure about what to feel about it. And Jiraiya was likely even stronger if his reputation actually meant anything. The jutsu being tossed around there, it was mind-boggling. But they had pulled through. Kakashi was even winning at the end there. Then they got rescued by that hunter nin. There was something off about him, but almost all of his sensei talked about how ninja went a little crazy sometimes. And that ninja had to have been almost his age. And he looked almost like Anbu. Now his constant training seemed a hell of a lot more important. Especially now that he realized that it wasn't just his life that he had to worry about. No matter what Kurama said. Of course, Kakashi had not been happy that they were facing an opponent this notorious, especially since it was a bit too much for even a B-ranked mission. But Kurama had constantly hammered into his head that there was always something that went sideways. Like, it didn't happen every time, but often enough where he should expect it to happen and prepare for the worst. He had been skeptical, but apparently, Kurama was right. As always. Well, you have at least a week for training and preparation. Naruto frowned. Why only a week? The bridge didn't look that close to being finished. Zabuza is still alive. He froze suddenly, causing the rest of the group to stop and look at him, silently asking him for an explanation. Zabuza is still alive. Sakura rolled her eyes. Don't be stupid, Naruto. Didn't you hear what Kakashi-sensei said about Hunter Nin? Naruto looked at his teammate, panicking slightly at having to explain Kurama before a sudden realization leaped into his head. Sakura, you use a lot of senbon, right? Why not use your poison on something like shuriken or kunai? She frowned. Senbon can more easily pierce deep enough for the poison to be injected into major arteries. It is much more fast-acting. But senbon by themselves aren't really that lethal, are they? Naruto, Kakashi already checked his vitals. And besides, I've read that if you are accurate enough, you can hit vital points that are very lethal, poison or no. Kakashi suddenly cursed under his breath. He was practically swaying on his feet due to the absolute exhaustion from his technique, but regardless, he should have caught it earlier. No, Naruto is right. Senbon can do more than just kill. And now that I think about it, they were not acting properly. Hunter Nin never carry a body. Destroying it on the spot is more efficient and negates the ability for them to be intercepted in transit. If you hit the correct spots, it is possible, if very draining to the recipient, to feign a very convincing death. Sakura gasped. The Zuna paled. So, that means Zabuza is likely still alive. Fortunately, it will still take him time to recover. He took a deep breath. Time I badly need to recover as well. The Sharingan takes a lot out of me. So what do we do now? Kakashi nodded at their client. Get him safe, just in case. And then, training. Kakashi was not teaching them anything new. And for once, none of Team 7 were complaining. They were at the skill level that anything that would actually have any use would take more than a week to be usable in combat. And they knew this. No, they were drilling the basics. Sakura was working on her accuracy. Sasuke was still working on increasing his stamina so he didn't run out of chakra if the fight lasted for more than a few minutes. And Naruto, on Kurama's instruction, asked Kakashi for a good place to train away from the others. That earned him a raised eyebrow, but the request was accepted regardless. Basically, Kurama was going to push things a little on the chakra training. He was going to trap the entire bridge area to oblivion, but the actual workers were civilians and probably wouldn't feel comfortable being surrounded by explosives. Or hidden knives. Or even smoke bombs. He was going to ask his new fox summon for help, but he couldn't do much about the fact that their likely encounter space for the enemy ninja was also frequented by civilians. That cut out more than 3/4 of his trap options. He did end up trapping the builder's actual house, though. Everything except the front door. And he told all the family about it. They were a lot more receptive to the idea after he explained himself. He still had to keep things non-lethal, just in case. The kid that lived there was infuriatingly depressed, though. He didn't even care that they were ninja or clearly knew what they were doing. He didn't even respect Kakashi, and he was a jounin. But he could kinda understand how the kid got so messed up. He still had a little trouble dealing with human death, and it was his job to do that. If it had been someone like Tucci, okay, his response would probably be to rip whoever did it to shreds or die trying, but he had the training for that. This kid was a civilian. And barely even academy age besides. Naruto's chest got uncomfortably hot. Alright, kid. This feels like the limit. I wonder if Kakashi'll let me try to assassinate this Gato guy. Later. Think about it after I'm not reinforcing your desire to murder people. Naruto looked down at himself. Wow. Okay then. He didn't just have chakra claws now. He had actual ones. He wasn't even using the transformation jutsu. Unfortunately, the little flashes of light dancing around him were a lot more frequent. Stealth was not exactly an option. If stealth was an option, you wouldn't need my power in the first place. Right. Stealth was an option, technically. If Kurama was actually in control of the chakra after he gave it to his partner, or theoretically, if Naruto learned to manage it like a Bijuu, he would be able to integrate it with no visual effects. That was the main reasons fully integrated Jinchuriki were able to induce partial transformations without a chakra cloak. But that was irrelevant at the moment. Now, Taijutsu with claws is significantly different than with fists. Naruto grinned at a new possibility. And with hinge. Steel can block better. Without my chakra to deflect blows or negate injury, you won't do well. Not without significantly more skill. Or speed. Though, before we start, I do recall you saying that you had an idea. Back in the boat. Oh, yeah. Well, remember how Jiraiya said I can't both project your chakra and make that gifting stuff seal? Of course. Kurama still didn't quite expect Naruto to succeed with either objective. Naruto did the impossible all the time, but it was better not to hold out too much hope. That only increased the pain and anger later on when it failed. It didn't mean he had no hope. It was just significantly measured. Well, you know my shadow clones. They make copies of me, right? And they're nothing but chakra. So if I can make one only using your chakra, he trailed off with a grin. Unlikely. That jutsu creates a clone of the one who shapes the chakra, not the one who provides it. Naruto's smile didn't fade. Well, I'll just have to change the jutsu, then. Not right now, you're not. If you get in another fight with Zabuza, you'll need to be ready. I thought you said my life wasn't in danger last time. Really? Kurama should have seen this question coming. He had held back in the previous fight not because Zabuza was not dangerous, but because he knew that last time, Naruto had fared just fine, even without his assistance. Now, he was stuck. He had trained Naruto in what he considered to be the most important shinobi arts of deception and creativity, traits he had underutilized before. Well, this time, he would be much more prepared when things got serious. The fact remained, though, that while he was possibly the best prepared genin there could possibly be, he was still a genin. Not even the technically genin he had been in his last life. An actual one, who deserved to still be one. And Kurama had no intention of pushing Naruto to such an extent that would create results like Haku. Or Danzo's route. And so his skills would likely still not be sufficient for this mission. And so he would need the power boost to break out of Haku's mirrors. Kurama. He decided to go with mostly truth. His accomplice is very skilled. Very likely above your level. While Kakashi can at least hold off Momochi's Zabuza, Haku is an opponent that cannot be underestimated. Haku? Kurama cursed his tongue, which was far freer than he had expected. It was getting harder and harder to separate the two Narutos in his mind, despite the clear skill differences. Never mind that. His name is of little concern. You will likely have to fight him, and you do not have the power to counter his abilities. Even though he is likely to aim for non-lethal damage, there is still a very real possibility of death. But if Sakura or Sasuke help, it is not a matter of help or even trickery this time. I have taught you how to think like a ninja, which will win you many fights. But in certain situations, like this fight on the bridge, where damage to the bridge is unwise, you have no elemental jutsu, and your opponent outclasses you heavily in certain attributes, especially speed, power is the one factor that you will be able to use to win. Naruto sighed. Alright, you win. I still expect you to only ask me for power when it becomes absolutely necessary. But I cannot take the chance that your possible failure would be permanent, right? Naruto scratched the back of his head, momentarily surprised when the claws actually caught in his hair. He brought his hand up to his face, examining it. This just hasn't really sunk in, you know. That I could actually die. Or that I might kill someone else. He put the hand down. Maybe even someone who doesn't completely deserve it. I guess I can just make sure that doesn't happen as often as I can. Kakashi was distinctly frustrated. He hadn't been able to observe any of Naruto's training. Worse, he couldn't even blame him. Unlike his teammates, Naruto seemed to instinctively understand that this was technically enemy territory. Or perhaps that was another learned behavior from his worrisome teacher. Regardless of the source, it was at least useful. Kakashi had learned early on that Naruto had a truly astounding disguising jutsu. Whether a legitimate Jinchuriki power or a lucky modification of the Academy Henge he wasn't entirely sure, but given its effectiveness and strange flexibility, he was strongly suspecting the former. The fact remained that if Naruto actually wanted to get somewhere unnoticed, he got there unnoticed. He was almost tempted to summon his tracking hounds, but besides being a terrible waste of chakra that he really needed to use to recover his strength, he was almost sure that the only thing that differentiated the fox Naruto and an actual fox was the presence of chakra. If he even kept to one form like that. He was almost sure he didn't in this case. He would have needed a sensor to find him, not a conventional tracker. Hopefully, the enemy wouldn't have hired one. It didn't entirely make sense for a man like Gato to do so, or even understand shinobi enough to know why one would be important, but he still worried. At least he had a good idea about what he would be keeping so secret. And really, if he were honest with himself, if the Kyuubi decided to run rampant, he would likely not have much of a chance of stopping it. Jiraiya would be the only one even close to helping out. Or maybe Tenzin, with his Mokuton. Besides, the week was almost over, and Naruto hadn't shown any signs of worrying behavior. Only the expected nerves from expecting a confrontation with a powerful ninja. Or perhaps that he finished each day almost at complete exhaustion. Of course, that wasn't entirely unusual for Naruto. But it was news for Sasuke and Sakura. Their group training sessions were significantly less intense. Now, though, both of them were attending to their training with a focused enthusiasm that was otherwise not present. The only true incident was with Tezuna's grandson, Inari, the day before Zabuza was projected to recover. That was a situation that had been slowly simmering for days. He did his best to comfort the child, but by far, it had been the most he had ever seen Naruto disturbed by anything. No matter. Tomorrow was when it was likely to all come to a head. All of them needed their sleep. 6 in the morning was not when Kakashi was planning to get up, but it was hard to plan for Naruto. He was shaking him rather insistently. "Sensei. That Gato guy didn't wait. People are attacking the bridge." Naruto was supposed to be sleeping, gathering his strength. Not keeping watch. But Kakashi didn't argue. He just stood and rushed out of the house, Naruto on his heels. "Why did you come back, then? Were these attackers ninja?" Naruto shook his head. "No, just reject samurai or something. But I'm not really sure how long my clones will last against them. I didn't put special amounts of chakra into them. Just the normal amount. One of them already popped, which is what woke me up." So he was sleeping, then. It didn't take them too long to clean up the remaining thugs, since there were less than 10 actually there, including the 2 that Naruto's clones had dispatched. The number would have likely been higher had Tezuna's workers not been there to start their workday. Protecting a single target was significantly easier than 12. Naruto wasn't exactly confident with his clones making more clones, at least not in battle. But it was disturbing that Gato had staged an attack now, of all times. Like he knew that they would be expecting the attack later on in the day and yet was patient enough to strike at the least likely moment. He was thinking disturbingly like a ninja. Either that or it was a coincidence and he simply got impatient. But Kakashi didn't believe in coincidences. Neither did Naruto. Naruto frowned. Why didn't he just hire more ninja? That takes time, Naruto. And the ability to find missing nin. Legitimate villages are also more expensive and may refuse a job if it is likely to create consequences like this one. It was also a possibility that Zabuza was actually the instigator of this attack and had some measure of authority over Gato's men. Either way, they needed to be prepared now, not in the originally planned 3 hours. Either Sasuke and Sakura. One of you tail Tezuna, one of you should stay with his family, and the other will come with me to the bridge to guard the workers. Naruto nodded and raced off. Kakashi sighed. It was not going to be a problem, per se. He was nearly back at full strength and he was no stranger to early mornings. But no matter what was right, he was still bringing 3 genin on a practically A-rank mission. Nothing had gone smoothly and he had a feeling that that trend wasn't going to end anytime soon. Kurama sighed inside his prison. He knew starting out that teaching Naruto would not necessarily be an enjoyable experience for him. Humans had some really stupid instincts to get rid of and barely any useful ones to speed things along. And he knew that he wouldn't exactly be considered teacher material. It was particularly hard to curb his impatience, especially seeing Naruto so inexperienced even compared to his still rather stupid teenage self. Though that teenage self had some unexpectedly good moments. But the worst part was knowing that your student was good, but not good enough. He found that his predictions on Naruto's ability to be depressingly accurate. He might have actually beaten Haku with trickiness if he hadn't been so inexperienced to run straight into the trap of his Kekkei Genkai. Of course, he didn't actually know what the mirrors did, but it was still rather stupid to run into something unknown and so outside the realm of normal ninja ability. Or perhaps he just didn't have a good enough idea of what was normal ninja ability. That didn't mean he wouldn't get an earful about it after the fight, though. He could have at least sent a clone in first. After he lent his power, though, it was some great catharsis by proxy. Naruto didn't have to dodge any of the senbon. His chakra-enhanced body was too durable for them to properly pierce him, at least at Haku's strength level. But he did anyway, and the look on the boy's face was priceless. Naruto could have smashed the mirrors easily with a swipe of his new claws. But he decided to simply catch Haku when he jumped between them and beat him with straight taijutsu. Okay, so perhaps Sasuke was looking at them with an intensity that demanded answers later. But with all the lessons he had been plagiarizing from Kakashi about teamwork, he had been surprised Naruto hadn't insisted on telling his team earlier. right? Kakashi stopped him from telling them earlier. But there was something else that bothered Kurama. There was a feeling growing in him that he wasn't entirely comfortable with. Naruto had done such things to him before, of course. Strange feelings had plagued him practically since he had first reached out to him. Identifying the emotion didn't help much, either. It was pride. Pride in someone else. It didn't make sense, though. In almost every objective way, Naruto had failed this mission. He had to be reminded constantly to use his brain, and when it mattered most, Kurama still had to step in. But the feeling remained, and it was infuriating. He was proud at all the wrong things. Why was he proud at Naruto managing to hold in his rage, when that rage was his own? Why was he proud of someone getting something right on the second try, when a single misstep could mean death? The worst part of all this was that he could no longer stay mad at his student properly. It was a difficulty with Naruto in general, but he could at least manage it by telling himself that this was a different Naruto. A more annoying one that could never replace the original. Maybe this was why Naruto was totally blind to just how annoying that kid named after the village was when he taught him the first time around. Of course, he could still be annoyed by the stupid things he did. Apparently, he taught Naruto the purpose of a shinobi a little too well, and rather than kill Haku, or Zabuza for that matter, he somehow convinced them that once their own mission was impossible to complete, it would be fun to drive that idiot Gato out. After they sliced him up, of course. The more things change, the more things stay the same, apparently. But it had unfortunate implications for Naruto's future interactions with missing nin. Most of them that were after Naruto were much stronger than Haku or Zabuza, and leaving any of them alive in any way meant imminent danger, not a potential ally. At least these two were relatively decent people. Or at least decent ninja. Easily predictable, at minimum. At least the danger is over and I can go back to my nap. The rest of the day was torture for Naruto. He could feel the looks of his teammates on his back, and he had a pretty good idea of why, but none of them seemed to want to bother him about it. Sakura's looks were worse. At least he could understand the clear confusion and jealousy from Sasuke. While Sakura's expression didn't quite match those from the rest of the village well, she didn't even know what was in him, and her expression was totally foreign to him. It was a well-known fact that girls were strange and unreadable, but something in the back of his head told him that it was a warning sign. And it wasn't even the other voice in his head. Remind me to give you a few lessons on espionage myself. Jiraiya is hopeless, but I assure you that girls are not as strange as you think them to be. That one. If it bothers you so much, just ask the brats about it. If they are going to reject us, it's going to happen with or without your input. Naruto knew he was right. Or at least strongly suspected that he knew what he was talking about. Still he couldn't quite bring himself to speak up about it. This wasn't like Jiji, where he already knew about Kurama, just not that he was nice. Sasuke lost his entire family, even extended family, because most of them blamed the Uchiha for the attack. They weren't entirely wrong. You already told me all about that. Kurama just grunted inside his head. It had been an entire rant. Quite a few rants, if you counted all the ones about the Uchiha in general. Sakura, well, she didn't lose anyone to the attack, but she came from a civilian family. Those were even worse than ninja families when it came to accusations of him literally being a demon. A reborn Kurama, not his prison. And he somehow had to either lie about being able to control Kurama's power or explain that he had mellowed out since the attack. Kurama sounded offended. I did not mellow out. Naruto ignored him. A shadow clone popped up right next to his bed. He had all night to think and possibly plan on what he would say. The sun was just peeking above the horizon when Naruto heard a soft knock on his door. The clone yawned but got up from the chair and opened the door. He had expected Kakashi-sensei, possibly giving them some extra training. Or even Sasuke, determined to figure out and perhaps even copy the power he showed in the fight. He wasn't expecting Sakura. He didn't expect her to look clearly worried. At least not worried for him, rather than the other way around. Awake boss. I don't think you want to talk to a clone. Sakura frowned slightly, but since Naruto couldn't figure out exactly why, he just shrugged the thought off and dispelled himself. Naruto woke up instantly, as he had trained himself to do after the influx of new memories hit him. And then he immediately groaned and wanted back in bed as he realized that nobody's life was actually in danger. Really? I couldn't have just shook myself like a normal person. Sakura. What are you doing here this early? I couldn't sleep very well. Naruto winced. Sakura's eyes widened slightly in recognition. She put her hands up quickly. Not because of you. Well, not because of that. Not anymore, at least. I could see that you had very good control, and even though I would like to know how you did any of that well, Sakura looked around herself. I'm worried about you. You always just seem to know what to do. You're always better prepared, always, she sighed. You didn't always do that well in the academy, but you knew immediately what Kakashi was trying to do with that bell test. You know all sorts of skills they never taught there, you just know all sorts of things that. Sakura shook her head, then sighed. That's not what I came here for. I've just never seen you that worried about something. I just wanted to say well she smirked. I might be a little jealous, but you aren't as annoying as I thought you were in the academy. And she looked a little awkward. I don't think anyone is going to have any issues with your bloodline. Naruto looked back up at her and she stiffened at his expression. That doesn't mean I like you like that, though. He deflated a little, but his awkward smile remained. Thank you. But, it isn't a bloodline. Sakura started. It isn't. What else could it be? I've never heard of something like that. Is it something you can do because of your large chakra reserves? Naruto rubbed the back of his head. It's more like the reason I have really big chakra reserves. Okay, maybe it's because of my mom, but he shifted uncomfortably. We should probably wake up Sasuke. He needs to know too. You do have a bloodline, though. I do. Sakura left, presumably to get their teammate. For your mother. That increased chakra is technically a bloodline and it is the very reason you can hold me. Even if I still liked you, without it, I would start to burn you from the inside out. Naruto frowned. I thought you said you were the reason I had really big chakra reserves, not the other way around. Your body did have to adapt, yes. But it would not have had the chance without your Uzumaki heritage. Is there anything else I should know about it? Just having a big chakra pool sounds well, it doesn't sound like any other bloodlines you told me about. Your chakra is extra compatible, I suppose. I remember that many Uzumaki could give their chakra to others who could use it as their own. And then there was their damnable Kekkei Genkai. That was annoying. Naruto jerked slightly. Wait, what? I suppose it wouldn't be terrible if you happened to possess it. Your mother had some very powerful sealing chains that could hold even me for a time. Unfortunately. It made being sealed inside of her incredibly annoying. And very boring. Sealing chains. Not so loud. But yes. It was rare. But Kurama briefly thought of the war. Seals strong enough to hold one like himself would be incredibly useful. It was one of the only reasons he thought that teaching Naruto sealing in the first place was worth the effort. And even though they weren't permanent, they made some of the more finicky permanent seals quite a bit safer to use. But I suppose we could see if you have the potential. Naruto. Sakura was back and Sasuke followed her. He didn't look entirely enthusiastic about being woken up so early, but there was a curiosity behind his annoyed expression. He shifted uncomfortably. So Sakura asked, uncertainty clouding her voice. Naruto sighed. I guess I should start by telling you my birthday. There was a swirl of illusory leaves and Kakashi was in the room. His expression was uncharacteristically serious. I think we should take this somewhere more private, don't you? Naruto glanced at Kakashi with a panicked expression but calmed down, a sudden warmth in his chest. He didn't say no this time. I know a place. It no longer mattered that his team would see it. And he wasn't going to be training there anymore, anyway. Kurama already told him that their training was going to be focusing on more traditional shinobi arts for the more immediate future. It was the most private place he could find back when he had started training with Kurama in one of the more inhospitable areas of the forest north of the village and away from any trails he could recognize by a large margin. His training was not exactly subtle. Or quiet. Though he supposed that, while private, it was not a particularly well-advised place to explain about his friend and occupant. While destroyed trees and rocks were a fairly common sight on training fields of higher-level shinobi, the claw marks were a bit unsettling to people who didn't know anything about Kurama. Or by the slight twitches in Kakashi's neutral expression, likely unsettling to those who only knew Kurama when he was angry or being controlled. So, Naruto, what about your birthday is important? Kakashi answered for him. Sakura, Naruto's birthday is October 10th, 12 years ago. She frowned. Isn't that the attack of the Kyuubi? Yes. Naruto spoke up for the first time. You know it's impossible to kill a tailed beast, right, Sakura? She frowned. No. Didn't the Yondaime? I guess it's possible to disperse a tailed beast, but they eventually reform and it's almost impossible to predict when or where that will happen. So ever since they were made, ninja have been sealing them instead. Kakashi reeled internally. Made? What has that fox been telling Naruto? The general consensus by the vast majority of shinobi is that they are natural phenomena. He hadn't been seriously considering the possibility that the Kyuubi was actually friendly with his host. Momentarily harmless, perhaps. But even Jinchuriki, who had full control over their tailed beast, had no more insight than the rest of them. But yeah. My dad sealed it in me before he died, since mom was too weak to seal it back in her. Naruto looked down, not particularly noticing the rest of his team's eyes boring into him. So he did learn who his parents were. It appeared that he was significantly more mature than his constant pranks indicated. Not once had he used his parents as leverage when he was caught or even when he was shunned. Or he was withholding that information for when it would have maximal effect. Either way, it was a promising sign for a ninja. Kakashi turned to Naruto's teammates. Incidentally, the information held in this discussion is considered an S-class secret by the Hokage. I doubt I have to tell you what the punishment for telling someone else is, do I? Sakura's eyes widened. Even Sasuke looked visibly taken aback. Then what about Naruto? Will something happen to him? Kakashi smiled. He is the only one exempt from this rule. Though since much of this was kept secret from him, I doubt that the Hokage expected that to be much of a problem. Sakura frowned and looked at Naruto. Then how did you find out? I know you took the scroll of seals, but I didn't think you would make a habit of stealing secret files. Kurama told me. Who's Kurama? Naruto rubbed his stomach. That's his name. The Kyuubi. She tensed. He's not that bad. At their alarmed expressions, he elaborated. I should probably mention he was being controlled when he attacked the village. Kakashi's head whipped around. What? Yeah. Someone that called himself Madara used a really strong genjutsu on him. Made him act like a dumb animal. Madara? But how could he be alive? Well, I only said that he called himself Madara. Kurama says he didn't look like him. Madara was taller. And had a different physical build. He also could control him a lot better. He was a lot more annoying, too. He also says he was a lot more annoying, but I'm not sure what he's talking about when he says that. Kakashi frowned. So someone from the Uchiha clan was involved, after all. But if Itachi was able to kill them, yet they could control a tailed beast, it doesn't make sense. And Itachi was loyal before he snapped. I knew him. Could it really be Madara, just weakened by time? Could he still be alive, after all? Sasuke spoke up. So this is the source of your power. I guess. Kurama won't let me use it unless my life is in danger, though. He looked around at the destroyed training area. And practice using it, I guess. We're ninja. Our lives are in danger constantly. Naruto shrugged. His definition of life in danger is a lot different. He says that power makes ninja very lazy. So he wants me to solve things by myself if it's possible. Or with my team. Sasuke frowned. I mean, I don't like that he's sealed in me any more than he does, and I sure would like it if he gave me some of it whenever I want, but it's his power, not actually mine. And, well, I wouldn't want people to just use my chakra without my permission, just because I have a whole lot of it. If I give it to people, I want it to be for a good reason. He reluctantly nodded. I just have to figure out how to actually give it to people, first. Sakura sighed. You can't just give people chakra, Naruto. Naruto shrugged. It's an Uzumaki thing, apparently. She groaned. I thought you said you didn't have a bloodline. Anyway, it doesn't matter all that much. Kakashi, shouldn't we get back soon? I know Gato is dead, but we are still supposed to be protecting Tazuna. Kakashi jabbed a thumb at Naruto. He left a few clones. You did? Naruto nodded. I thought things might take a while to explain. When? Kakashi answered her. During our little walk through the forest. Naruto has a few abilities he has decided to keep secret. He glanced at the boy. We should use the rest of our time off to polish our teamwork now that secrets are no longer an issue, don't you think, Naruto? Naruto winced. He hadn't even brought out his shunin ability during their time together. And he didn't even have a good excuse either, other than the flimsy I'm not that good at it yet. His modified version may have had almost no use, but the normal jutsu was almost complete as long as he jumped a little before activating it. Kurama's definition of mastery was different than most of his classmates and even Iruka-sensei, but it didn't mean he shouldn't use something in practice. And he didn't even mention his espionage training with Jiraiya. Sure, it wasn't fighting like his teammates seemed to focus on, but it was still important for his teammates to know his abilities. They weren't enemies. And despite Sakura's admittedly annoying behavior and Sasuke's insistence to do everything that he could on his own, they were the closest people Naruto had to friends that were in the same class as himself. Okay, and he still had a bit of a crush on Sakura, despite everything. Naruto smiled, relaxing a little. None of them had rejected him. Right, sensei. So, what are we starting with? The last few days of the bridge building went by as fast as D-rank type work ever did. Now that they were less worried about an attack, they were able to be more involved with the actual building process. As usual, Naruto did a majority of the work himself, as his clones let him be many places at once. And their group training sessions, even going 2 at a time to keep a guard with Tazuna, were much different. Better, somehow, even though Naruto was suddenly the one winning every spar. Though he did constantly get complaints from his teammates that he spent more time running away with a shunin than actually fighting. It felt good. Not the winning, though that was still a little satisfying, but telling someone else the truth with something like this. It felt like trust, and he only had one other person like that. Maybe Jiji was like that, but he was always busy and almost never there. Maybe Iruka-sensei, but he was usually more interested in how Naruto was feeling and not about his jutsu or anything like that. His abilities had a strange effect on his teammates, too. He had never seen Sasuke with so much focus on a task actually at hand. And he had never quite seen Sakura so visibly disheveled. Not for the purpose of training, certainly. She looked oddly prettier when she was like that, which was a confusing thought all on its own. And she was getting a lot harder to beat too, which only made winning feel better than usual. Not that he was even supposed to be a combat-focused ninja, at least according to Kakashi. After evaluating his trap making, he was much more suited to sabotage. Especially considering his disguise abilities. And his ability to get the heck out of there. His only problem was his massive chakra. Even with Kurama behind a seal, his chakra pool itself had grown massively to compensate, and even with his best effort suppressing it, he barely got it down to look like he was a normal adult jounin. It sure made things like explosive tags a lot easier to use, which was a big plus. With everything that happened, though, none of them really relaxed properly until they were back on their way to Konoha. Oh, and he had a bridge named after him. Which was both great and terrible. Great because it represented an entire town that respected him and possibly even admired him despite half of them kinda fearing him at the same time. He had dreamed of having things like bridges named after him when he became Hokage. The issue was that he expected to become Hokage first. That is, strong enough to be well known like that. Hopefully, none of the other nations would realize that the name of the bridge in Wave was the same as one of Konoha's genin and take special interest in him. Or if the stories weren't exaggerated, look too closely at his face in general, because his dad could definitely be considered well known. Kurama had told him many times, and he had seen enough of Haku and Zabuza to know he was not ready in the least for that kind of attention. Unfortunately, Kurama had refused to give him any training beyond some occasional advice about the sealing homework Jiraiya had assigned him before the mission began. And then Kakashi told them on the way back to Konoha that he was giving them an entire week off of training. PFF. Giving us a week. Like we need even more time off. Not even Sakura looked happy about that, like he half expected her to be. Naruto kicked his stick into the fire. Now they were back out of Wave, fires were allowed again. Which was nice for his teammates, since ration bars were disgusting and they seemed to have a weird sort of aversion to eating things raw. It meant he was able to make ramen, though. Still, he wasn't being entirely fair to them. The academy might not have been that long ago by any objective measurement, but Sakura definitely wasn't the kind of kunoichi she used to be, book smart but knowing almost nothing practical. She hadn't been stuck guarding Tazuna during their fight with a missing nin because she was weak, it was because most of her offensive capabilities were ranged anyway. She wasn't strong just yet, but she wasn't just the prettiest ninja anymore. Sasuke was well, he still didn't talk that much, his dark looks off in the distance were still worrying, and Kurama still didn't like him at all, but none of those dark looks were directed at him anymore. For Naruto, even something as simple as someone not disliking him was something to cherish. He still wasn't quite the person he'd choose as a teammate, but after what happened on the bridge, it was hard to not feel attached. Naruto leaned back, watching the stars. Now that he was fully with his team and there was no civilian in the way, it was easier to notice that he fell asleep much later than the rest of them. He got up earlier, too. It wasn't that he was too nervous, and there wasn't a technique he was particularly excited about practicing at the moment. He just wasn't tired until later. Kakashi had noticed this early on, and he had taken first watch ever since. Last watch, too, if he was feeling particularly lazy. Okay, maybe he did have a point about needing to recover chakra. Naruto. He sat up, glancing at the fire to make sure she hadn't noticed something ready to escape. When that didn't seem to be the case, he turned to his teammate more fully. Sakura. She looked nervous and even a little embarrassed. Naruto's heart caught in his throat, but he forced it back down. What's it like? Huh? Having the Kyuubi in you? She frowned. I can't even think of how that would work. Naruto wasn't expecting something like a confession of love, but he couldn't help but be slightly disappointed. Still, this was a topic he was intimately familiar with. Possibly uniquely so. Actually teaching something to Sakura instead of the other way around was a novel change. You don't have to. Naruto smiled to reassure her. No, it's fine. First, his name's Kurama, remember, right? She was still obviously uneasy. Naruto took a deep breath. Right. Well, I guess I can start with how it works, I guess. Naruto took a small scroll from his uniform. So, you are familiar with storage scrolls, right? Sakura nodded. He rolled it out to a blank section and Sakura leaned in a bit closer in interest. Most that were sold in supply stores were already filled out with script to store certain kinds of items. Naruto picked up a pinacone and took his brush out of its place on his arm holster. So a basic seal for holding things takes this form. He made a few strokes, ones that were very much common to the other seals she could see on the portion of the scroll that was still spread out between them. And then there are a few more that determine what sort of state you want to store it in. These, too, seemed almost identical to most of the others he had. And then finally, some more that sorta describe what you need to hold there. Then you just add some chakra and the pinacone disappeared into the scroll with a poof of smoke. Naruto glanced at Sakura's face and seeing that there was no confusion there, he released the Pinacone and rolled the scroll back up. Naruto, did you just waste that entire section of the scroll for a Pinacone? He just shrugged. Hiro-sensei said he'd teach me a jutsu to wipe off inactive seals pretty soon. So what does a sealing scroll have to do with your seal? How do you seal, that?